Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Today is Tuesday. It is August the 25th, and I'm feeling particularly spicy today since I found out that I'm a terrorist. I kind of like that. I kind of don't really care what anyone thinks from my previous organization. But what I do want to do is a meta-analysis. So today is going to be a little bit more personal than it could be, because I'm pretty confident when somebody goes out there and sends a veiled threat my way, then I'm able to pick it up. Now, maybe I'm completely out to lunch, and you guys can let me know. You guys are seeing in the chat, I'm feeling a little bit spicy. There was a question about whether or not there was an update in my lawsuit, since I'm being sued by the FBI director's girl who is a friend. And the answer, of course, is no, don't be ridiculous. Imagine me telling you that I got sued a year ago was like someone saying that they were planning on getting pregnant. And yesterday we had a status update, and the status update was essentially that we're in the first trimester. So if you find yourself every day asking women in the first trimester, hey, did you have the baby yet? That's how ridiculous it sounds to me. Yesterday, I sat down with a judge, my former attorneys, and the attorneys for the girl who is the friend of the FBI director, who no one knows what her name is, except it's Alexis Wilkins. I have to know because it's in the lawsuit. And the update is the judge agreed that I'm allowed to represent myself as my own attorney after spending tens of thousands of dollars not getting the case thrown out. That's the update. That's it. There was a judge who said, I just want you to know you'll be held accountable to all the rules that take place and are required under the federal rules of federal procedure, the civil procedure, the district rules for the Western District of Texas, and the unique and specific rules to your particular judge, which all is freaking insane. There are so many sets of rules and gatekeeping sort of little procedures that keep us from the justice system. And anybody who's gone through it has already felt this way. I'm just having it from a different angle. And it's demoralizing to actually look at it. It affirms that we can't vote our way out of it because the system we've built up is so rickety, and the scaffolding that we've created to have access to something that should be really simple. Have you been defamed? Yes or no? Okay, present evidence that you've been defamed. A regular person should be able to determine whether or not they've been defamed, and a regular person should be able to say whether or not they defamed that person. We should be able to have it in front of a jury. This is the whole point of our system, is that people would say, here's the evidence, here's the way that we've gone through it, we've assessed whether or not it's true. Here's 12 individuals that represent your peer group, and they've decided that a reasonable person thinks this or doesn't. That's not what's happening. I was sued 1 year ago today for words that I had uttered 5 days earlier and then had corrected. And I had stated them, we had some bad information. Here's what it looks like. I issued a clarification and correction. There's no defamation. The people who sued me promoted the small clip, which was only a couple of minutes long, of an otherwise 2-hour podcast to an audience 20 times bigger than my audience. They shared it with all kinds of people. And by the way, the fact that this is even interesting to anyone indicates that the person who is suing me is a public figure, and therefore they have to prove actual malice. I don't have any actual malice. I didn't even know her name when I said it because I didn't know her name. That's how important she was. The whole thing was to point out that the FBI director, currently Kash Patel, is a liar and a scumbag and someone who has clearly operated in bad faith. Demonstrably. And at that moment, during that time, the entire context was I had just pointed out that the pilot who was flying his plane, which he said he was going to ground and thought Chris Wray didn't need, was in fact one of the agents working on CR-15, which was the Vortex originating case squad that pushed out the Mar-a-Lago case squad. It ended up doing Arctic Frost and other things. All of the lawfare against Donald Trump and sort of the previous administration. It was the apex of what the quote unquote old FBI was involved in. And his pilot had been on that squad. And he didn't even know it because he knew nothing about the FBI because he chose to alienate the people who did know something about the FBI. I've got a really interesting little look into my former boss, who sat down and did a podcast last night with Gary Melton. Many of you guys don't like Gary Melton because you don't agree with him on the Candace Owens / Tyler Robinson / Charlie Kirk stuff. I don't care about that. I don't think it's that interesting. I'll do a podcast with Clint Russell when he has time. I still believe that there's nothing similar to that compared to what happens with some of the other cases like Brian Cole, or even this most ridiculous thing that just came out of Albany, which is a really obvious case of FBI playbook. Not entrapment legally, although morally, ethically, and of course to the common viewer, it feels exactly like entrapment. I'm also going to go over a movie that we made, we being me and Steve Friend, who shows up on our Friday shows. And that movie was called Police State. It was with Dinesh D'Souza. It was co-produced by former FBI Deputy Director Daniel Bongino. It starred people like Julie Kelly, Peter Schweitzer, Darren Beatty, Kash Patel, Nick Searcy, Brandon Gill, now a congressman, and of course, Dinesh D'Souza, who was the actual narrator and the talker through. It had a small little segment that included the Suspendables. Sonia Labasco was in there for a few moments. George Hill was in there and made the trailer. I was in there, Steve Friend, etc. Okay? So we're going to go through a little moment. When I say you can't vote your way out of it, I mean exactly that. Your votes will not lead to whatever this is ending, period. And apparently, that makes me a terrorist, per my former boss. My former boss, who just sat down with the FBI director, and his only connection to being a mouthpiece talking about the FBI is that he hates me. He's also one of the most unremarkable human beings that you'll ever meet. He's dishonest, he's fat, he's lazy, he was a shitty FBI agent who didn't do FBI work, and he deliberately spent as much time as possible not doing the work that the FBI does, and then he lies about it. He also spent all of his time with a woman who wasn't his wife at work 8+ hours a day, where they were the only two people in the office, and he bought her gifts with government money. He bought her a gym and a bunch of other stuff. And all the people that I worked with constantly would have all these little questions. Hey, are they having some kind of an affair? Then she lost her marriage over an affair. Whether it was with him or not, I have no idea. But those kind of people now are running around on national platforms, sitting with the director of the FBI. And the only connection they have to anything, and the only reason anybody wants to hear what they have to say, is because I am saying things that upset the current FBI director, and they are looking for any way to poke at me. So today's show is going to be a little personal. But I'm not going to be emotional about it. Actually, I'm going to just laugh about the ridiculousness of it. And so I've got pieces from Gary Melton's show last night, at least the ones that I think are relevant. The claim that if you say certain words, that makes you a terrorist. I'm going to just go ahead and say at the outset that other people who have said you can't vote your way out of this included our founding fathers. In fact, America is a revolutionary place, and words that have revolutionary intent are in fact constitutionally protected speech. The reason I know that is because the guys who did that revolution then wrote a Bill of Rights, and the first right they enshrined that said the government has no ability to investigate was that you have the right to freedom of speech and freedom of the press. And I do both of those things here. That doesn't mean the FBI is not investigating us. That actually was my original point to Daniel Bongino in September of 2022. It's funny how the loop always ends up closing. The first thing that I sat down and told Mr. Bongino in September of 22, while I was technically an unpaid forever, suspended by the FBI forever agent, was that the FBI runs two types of cases, and most people have no idea. One of them is a criminal case. It is linear. It involves the allegation or information that a federal crime took place. They look for the who person who did it. So it's the who, what, when, where, why, how. They try to prove that. The United States attorney will take it in front of a grand jury, or they will issue a complaint. They will arrest said person, and then they will take them through the process in our judiciary, which is deeply unfair, as many J6ers found out, as many people who have been accused of terrorism found out. That's it. And it ends in either an acquittal, a plea, or it ends in a conviction. Maybe some appeals, the end. But the other thing, which is what the FBI really does, and it's the thing that is most dangerous, and it's the thing that I've been warning about since I became a public figure in any way, shape, or form, albeit reluctantly, is that the FBI does intelligence investigations. They fall primarily under two different categories. One is counterterrorism. We talked about one of those over the last couple days. The other one is counterintelligence. Both of them are witch hunts. They are information-only investigations that do not require the allegation or information that a federal crime took place. They are simply indicating that they want to find information about a threat. I'm using air quotes right now. If you're listening, the threat is something that they articulate and they define. It's not illegal. It doesn't have to be immoral. It doesn't have to be unconstitutional. It just has to be something that is bureaucratically defined as a threat. And it is a self-serving definition. It is a thing that the government defines to be a problem for the government. That should scare the ever-loving shit out of you if you're a regular person who believes in freedom. And that's been the ongoing message that I've had since I've started speaking. It's been several years now. It feels like forever, but it's only been about 4 years. We're actually coming up on the 4-year anniversary of me publicly speaking. And the government always defends the government's position. And interestingly enough, mouthpieces for the government also defend the government's position. This is explicitly what the founding fathers who wrote the Declaration of Independence and eventually helped put together the Constitution for this country, that's what they came up with. And they defended your right to speak out against said things. We're going to talk about a concept called stochastic terrorism. Stochastic terrorism is this nonsensical idea that words are violence. It is a leftist idea. It was developed by a mathematician in the early 2000s. It is almost explicitly, previously, quoted by leftists, and now it has been picked up by people on the political right to include people like Charlie Kirk. It is absurd, and it is constitutionally protected speech. And that's what I've been accused of, interestingly enough, and not in a very veiled way. So we're going to go through all of those things. And yes, that was kind of a long lead up to it, but I don't really mind because it's the Kyle Seraphin show, which means I get to do the way that I want. Let's talk about protecting yourself from some of the dipwads. Isn't that a Daniel Bongino word? I feel like I learned that a long time ago. The types of people that might try to scam you. I'm not talking about the FBI director, Kash Patel, even though his people are probably involved in that kind of stuff. Hundreds of data broker companies are out there publishing your name, your family's information, your address, your phone numbers, pretty much anything that's ever been leaked online, maiden names, old addresses, tax records, emails, etc., etc. It's all just sitting out there unless you do something to take it down. If someone knows who you are, they can find out where you live. They can find out where you used to live. They can find out when the deeds changed hands. They can map out your entire life. It isn't hard to do. I've done it in 15 minutes on people. And once they've done that, they can do so for various intentions. Maybe they want to expose that you're a scumbag who has a bunch of Democrat donations and your husband is a heavy Democrat lobbyist while you're pretending to be a MAGA person. Or maybe they're trying to take everything out of your bank account and they want to empty it out because they got your logins from the dark web and they're going to use the information they have to uncover your security information or answer your security questions with your bank. Patriot Protect is a way that you can take this stuff down. They use the information that they've removed from these data brokers. They go out there and get it down so that nobody has a chance to use it against you. This is something that is a progressive process. They are constantly updating their own databases to make sure that this stuff gets taken down. When more goes up, more goes back down, and you have a limited threat surface, attack surface. They're in the information business as well, but they're doing it on your dime and it's not that expensive. Couple of bucks a month, patriot-protect.com/Kyle. You just saw it on the screen. Patriot-protect.com/Kyle. A phone scam can run you as many as thousands of dollars at a time. Emptying your bank account could cost you tens or hundreds of thousands. Stealing the deed to your house or any other things. Yes, check them out. Make sure you're doing something. It's inexpensive, $5, $10, $8 a month, something like that, depending on the service you choose. Patriot-protect.com/KYLE. The code Kyle at checkout will save you 15% on the annual subscription. That's the way that you get the discount. Link in the show description as well. Very easy to get there if you don't remember it, but it's patriot-protect.com/Kyle. You guys have heard it before. Protect yourself. You never know what kind of dummies are out there trying to do sketchy stuff. Some of them used to be your boss. Okay, that was just me. Here we go. Let's get started with today's podcast. So, some of this stuff came up because we've been talking about the story of Grimace. And this is a woman named Jessica Bowie or Bowie, but I've been calling her Grimace because she looks like the McDonaldlands character who basically was wearing a black burqa, which simulated being in a very large teardrop, pear-shaped costume. And she was doing ridiculous surveillance, which was caught by the FBI and the DOJ and put in a charging document. And you see it on the screen if you are listening right now. And this case is a classic case of the FBI's playbook. One of the things that I said very early on, probably in the first interview, if I had to go back and guess. I haven't listened to it in a while, but I'll go back and listen. I'm almost positive I mentioned Trevor Aaronson's story, which is called The Terror Factory. I will dig it up, or maybe our chat archivist Rose will pull it up. There is a TED Talk. It's about 15 minutes long. And it tells the story of the playbook. Now, the problem with Trevor Aaronson's telling of that story is that he believed the FBI was targeting people who were low IQ and had low friend quotients and had a difficulty sort of existing in society. He thought they were being targeted because they were Muslim or because they were brown or black. So he thought the FBI was fundamentally a racist organization, and they were looking for minorities to pin crimes on to be able to, go after minorities for their own sake. And it turns out that's actually not the case. And I tried to make this argument to Dinesh D'Souza when we were pitching the idea, when he pitched me the idea, would you help me with this movie we want to make? And they ended up calling it Police State. I don't know what the working title was when we first got started, but he had one idea. And I said, the real story here is that the FBI is a self-serving organization that has been doing the same thing to people, and black and brown people were just kind of like the targets du jour. They were just people that were being targeted at that moment. But they were not uniquely interesting to the FBI, although the FBI has historically gone after mostly left-wing targets. The outrage from Dinesh D'Souza, the Dan Bonginos, the Julie Kellys, Nick Searcy's, Peter Schweitzer, Rand Paul, Jim Jordan, Kash Patel, et cetera, et cetera. You guys are seeing some of the names of the people that were on that are on the screen. They were actually in the program. These names were interested in the FBI turning towards conservatives. But it wasn't because they were conservative, just like it wasn't because they were black and brown previously. The FBI targeted people where there was a budget. And the budget came from a terrorist mandate post 9/11. So one of the first and earliest podcasts I ever did, probably the first time I ever talked to George Hill in any long form, meaningful way, was when he explained to me that the definition of terrorism changed on 9/11. So when I say that we're not voting our way out of this, I actually have come to believe, and this is your opportunity to assess whether or not it makes sense to you or not, but I believe that our elections have been getting more and more fraudulent, maybe have been fraudulent in totality since just before 9/11, which also makes me believe that we are at a 9/11 type moment right now. The attitude in America, the dissatisfaction with the way that things are going, the looking at this sort of run off a cliff mentality is something that was building in the late 1990s. And our art and our music and our film and our general sentiment was that something had to give. And so people were wondering, like, is it going to be revolutionary? There was a search for God. There was a question of, like, what are we doing here and why? And are we the good guys? Who's the bad guys? If we're the only ones out here, are we the bad guys? This mentality was going and percolating through people's minds as I was graduating college and graduating high school and going into college. Of course, I was minimally aware of it because 18, 19, 20 years old, you're kind of a moron. But that's the space that I was in. And on just after, I guess I was 19. I think that's right. I'll double check it, but I'm pretty sure I was 19. I was in my sophomore year sitting in the lobby watching the planes hit the towers. And you can argue what happened or why or other thing else, but planes flew into buildings in New York City. And America went, oh shit, we do have an enemy. And this enemy is called Al-Qaeda. And so then we went looking for them in the places they were, and we fought them where they were, and we sent our military into a 20+ year conflict. And so we externalized the violence that people were feeling from my generation and the one above me, disaffected Gen Xers, the oldest millennials who were pissed off about what the hell was going on and why were we here and what was being done to us. Why was our future being frittered away by a government that didn't seem to care and was spending recklessly? And what they did is they took the national debt and they multiplied it by almost 10x over the next 25 years. That's what went down. And that definition of terrorism went from saying, we will defend the United States Constitution. We will say that Americans have a right to exist in this country under certain freedoms that are protected from government intervention. They can speak, they can practice their religion, they can gather, they can write things in the press, and they should not be harassed by their government. And we changed that definition on September 12th of 2001, and the definition became no American will die of a terrorist attack on U.S. soil, and that is a fundamentally tyrannical mandate. And we got things like the Patriot Act. We got expansion of 12333, the executive order that allowed the sharing of captures by the NSA to federal law enforcement, which was just an absolutely devastating move. It should be the death knell of the FBI. It turned them into the intelligence agency that they are today. And so we started having people with badges and guns looking for threats instead of investigating crimes. They always had that mandate, but it represented a very small fraction of what the FBI did previously. It became a much larger fraction to the point that under the Biden administration, which was simply just a temporal moment, it had nothing to do with whether or not that guy was in charge, as far as I can tell. The budget was behind terrorism investigations, and so they went after people that we call J6ers, people who were some violent in the low hundreds, and tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people who were simply present doing things that were constitutionally protected. And the FBI blurred the line between constitutionally protected speech, free association, petitioning your government for a redress of grievances, and people who were violent insurrectionists that were going to go and destroy the United States system of government, of which there was obviously no plan. There was no tactic or capability that they were going to be able to execute on that day, which would involve them holding, keeping, or somehow changing the United States system of government. We've had government continuity plans going back to the Cold War. So they would have just evacuated the president. They would have evacuated the vice president, a couple of people in the chain of command, and that would have been it. And then even if you held the buildings of Congress, the physical space does not confer power. In theory, it's the will of the people that confers power. But what we also saw was that hundreds of thousands of people were deeply dissatisfied with COVID shutdowns, lockdowns by their government, arbitrary decisions to destroy their businesses, take away their own personal medical freedoms, and the fact that Americans, writ large, are a dumb people at this point who do not want freedom. They only want freedom from responsibility, and they absolutely love being patted on the back by daddy government saying, "You've done a good job for turning in your neighbors. We were no better and no different as a society than any other society that we've looked back on and scorned as doing evil in the name of doing laziness." That's my ongoing belief. When this definition of terrorism changed, people started talking about terrorism as though it had many branches. Terrorism is just using violence, specifically violence, to get a political outcome. It's had a long and easy understanding. Hey, I want to hijack a plane, and I am doing it to get the free exercise of something. I need your government to do this thing and use its levers of power to free my comrades in arms in this other place. Terrorism. I would like to blow up this place, and I would like to do it so that the people who live there vote the way that I want because they're too terrified to go some other way. I would like to blow up this thing. I would like to shoot these people. All these sort of ideas of what terrorism is very obvious. It's like, what are they doing? They're using violence for a political mandate, and they are doing so, generally speaking, to make the threat of future violence cause a policy change. Which is why anybody who grew up during the global war on terror era remembers, we don't negotiate with terrorists. There was great things like Harrison Ford on Air Force One. We're not going to negotiate with terrorists, he said in a grovelly voice. And we all kind of have that. It's a joke at this point because we obviously negotiate with terrorists. We're currently negotiating with Iran. And that's one of the main news stories right now, which we're not going to cover because I just don't think it's that important, because I don't think it's going anywhere. The Iranians just said, for whatever it's worth, that they are going to be able to hang on for as long as they need to. They have a 2-year plan to be able to survive Donald Trump's economic sanction package. Here, I think I can actually show it to you. There it is. Axios. Donald Trump's Iran D-Day. It leaves sanctions hammer hanging because they didn't actually say what it is they're going to do. The Iranians basically said, we're prepared to resist you as long as we need to. So we're going to talk about this stochastic terrorism idea. First of all, let me play you people that you will not like saying those words. And then I'm going to play you people who assert that they are somehow on the side of conservatives, that they are like you, and that they have some sort of authority or some sort of value to add in the commentary space. And when you see people that claim to be on the political right using words that represent things on the political left, or more importantly, when they represent the government's official position, which, by the way, has not changed. If you believe that there was a leftist type movement of government employees, and by and large, people in the federal government vote Democrat, whether that means anything or not is irrelevant. The sentiment of people who work for the government is that they believe in the government because they work for the government. It's a circle. My job is important. My job is for the government. Ergo, the government is important. Ergo, I vote for my job, aka the government. That's why they vote Democrats. Democrats think that government is the solution to all problems. Republicans think that the only solution to government problems is government, and so they are not that much different. One is going the speed limit on the road to tyranny. The other one is going in the fast lane and breaking the laws. We end up in the same place at some point in time. Here's AOC, noted thought leader of the Democrat Party, talking about this concept of stochastic terrorism. I just want you to hear it from a voice you don't like first. And then I'm going to play more voices you don't like, because that's what we do here.
I think it's uncomfortable serving with people who engage in what many experts deem stochastic terrorism, which is the incitement of violence which is an incitement of violence using digital means and large platforms so that individual themselves may not be the one that's wielding a weapon.
Got it. The individual themselves is not wielding the weapon. The phrase stochastic terrorism was originally introduced in a technical context by a risk analyst and mathematician Gordon Wu in 2002, which does take us back to 9/11, which was in 2001, and more specifically, it was at the end of the year in 2001. So this sort of concept came out about the same time. The modern political definition was coined and popularized by a blogger using the pseudonym Geek or G2Geek on the website Daily Costs, which is dramatically left-leaning, and that was in 2011. The technical origin, Gordon Wu first used stochastic terrorism models in risk modeling literature to describe how anticipated media coverage of major events impact the statistical probability of random acts of terrorism. This is an academic, highly technical, nonsensical word that describes basically that if you talk something about something enough, you normalize it into existence, maybe, based on statistical probability and modeling. This would be correlation, not causation, but it's been taken to mean that by saying something, you're either manifesting it by saying it or you're normalizing it enough that people are going to do it and it's your fault because you talked about something. In other words, by saying you're not going to vote your way out of this, somehow we're going to make the leap that makes you a terrorist by talking about it. I'll answer that in a bit. The modern definition, blogger G2Geek, adopted the term on Daily Cost to define the public demonetization of individuals or groups through mass media that statistically incite predictable acts of violence. Do other people talk about it? Of course. Have they talked about it recently? Yes. It's a leftist concept. How do I know? Because you can go out there and look, how has it been used? Depending on who you're looking for, we could be talking about prominent mathematician or a famous American historian. We're looking for the mathematician, Dr. Gordon Wu, mathematician and risk analyst. He does not have a public partisan affiliation. His work is strictly academic and mathematical. That was the original use of this word. It was a concept he was trying to define in mathematics while he was doing risk analysis. However, this concept, which describes the public demonization and rhetoric that can statistically inspire random acts of ideologically motivated violence. Again, this is a correlation that when something is discussed enough, eventually it may happen. It's frequently used by political liberals to critique conservative rhetoric. There you have it. Now, the fun thing about this day, and the reason why some of us look around and say, obviously, we're not going to vote our way out of it, because the people on the left and the people on the right are actually saying the same damn thing. I will show you significant examples of people on the right using this, even though it originated on the political left in 2011. So this term and this concept that words are violence is something that the right has embraced. And I should say right in air quotes, because they're not like me. They're not actually conservative people who think that words are words, and I don't care what you say. People can threaten me, and I don't mind. I don't like it that much, but I don't think it should be legally enforced. I think you should be able to say whatever it is you want, and sometimes people defame you. I have a problem with defamation laws as a general rule, and people defame me on a daily basis. It's my own fault for being in this space. Did I want it? No. Was it God's plan for me? I suppose it must be, because it is what's happening. I never wanted to be a public figure in any way, shape, or form. I had no aspirations of having a radio show, a podcast, a public persona, a Twitter account. I didn't want any of this stuff. I still don't actually want it, to be fair. And if I had a moment where money was no object, I would disappear. Because the biggest thing that was stolen from me when the FBI took my career was my anonymity. which was to say, I didn't seek anyone else's attention on purpose. I deliberately minimized my footprint because it wasn't something that I wanted. It wasn't like, well, if I could just get enough following, then maybe one day I could have a show where people listen to me and I could parlay that into a lucrative way of being maybe a media figure, and then it would allow me to run for office so I could get some access to public power. Of course, I'm talking about someone called Daniel Bongino, who lost 3 elections during his political career, which is the same as his podcasting career, which included a lost election for the Senate in 2012 in Maryland. He won the primary, but was landslided out of existence because he was running in Maryland, which is a hard left area. Then again, 2 years later, he ran for a House election and he won the Republican primary, but he didn't make it. The incumbent stayed in because that's what happens in Maryland. And then he moved to Florida, and then he ran for House seat in 2016 in the 19th district of Florida, and he didn't even finish first in the Republican primary. So he is a 3-time election failure. Multimillionaire, has tons of money, strong state of financial obligation and financial connection to Rumble. His platform is the thing that we started our audience on. And amusingly, the minute that he started getting critical of what I had to say, we lost our ability to grow an audience there. We have been at the same size since Daniel Bongino decided to be pissy with me about something where he was objectively wrong, which is that his buddy, Julie Kelly, also an alumni from the movie Police State, believed that the FBI was trying to assassinate Donald Trump because they included some generic use of force language, which has been in there for every single FBI search warrant and operation since Ruby Ridge, which, by the way, was in the late 90s. Right? Am I correct on that? Let me double check. I don't want to say something incorrect while I'm sitting here. When was Ruby Ridge? Sorry, 92. So early 90s. The language about use of force was something that grew out of the FBI's terrible use of force and what looked like a abuse of power in Idaho in 1992. In August of 1992, by the way, we are actually now on the 34 year, is that right? I think so. The 34-year anniversary of the standoff. It happened August 21st to August 31st of 1992. One of the really early moments for a lot of people that are in my age bracket and a little bit older, when they started seeing what is this idea of a police state? What is it when the government can come in and seize your life or your freedom, your financial means, and it can be over some petty bullshit law. And in the case of Ruby Ridge, there was an attempt by the ATF to justify its own existence as a government agency because there was a moment when the ATF almost blinked out of existence. Nobody even knew why we had an ATF. And so they were like, well, let's get rid of it. Let's just shut it down. It was at Treasury. It's no longer doing tax collection. There's no real place for it to be in law enforcement. Its mission in law enforcement going after guns and tax evasion is actually something that's easily covered by the FBI. So we don't need them. And they went, no, I've spent my whole life in my career building up to this governmental garbage job. And there's no way that I'm going to go start at a new agency. We are going to justify the existence of this agency. We're going to do some big operations. And those operations included things that took place against Randy Weaver, where they ended up killing innocents. They killed his 14-year-old son and his wife. His baby was shot. They included operations like what happened in Waco, where they decided to do a big splashy operation when they could have done an easy snatch and grab of David Koresh, who likely was a pedophile and was doing all kinds of disgusting stuff. He was not some freedom advocate. He was a creep and he was a cult leader. But they turned him into a martyr because they surrounded it and they effed it up. And they brought in the military and National Guard. And they had ATF agents shot on the roof. And my family was deeply connected to that story because my dad was running the largest AM radio station at the time in that market. It took place near Waco. Waco is in the major market of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, and KRLD 1080 covered that story. My dad ended up talking to the guy who said the government was trying to kill him, and he wasn't wrong. I think they were trying to kill him by the time that came around. That was some of the earliest instances where people started seeing things about a police state. And it grew into going after Muslims after 9/11, so people stopped worrying about it on the right. But this was ignoring like decades of stepping over its boundaries. Things like PatCon and COINTELPRO, et cetera, et cetera. The FBI had sins in every decade, and they were always sins against the liberty of being able to have free speech, free association, have whatever political beliefs you want, and being able to have spicy rhetoric, which you're allowed to have in America. And the reason I know it is because the people who founded this country had some pretty spicy rhetoric. Give me liberty or give me death is pretty freaking spicy, if that's the alternative, if that's the dichotomy that you phrase it as. So for me to say that we aren't voting our way out of it, let me be really clear what that means. Your vote will not result in something different because your votes have been trying to get something different probably for about 25 plus years. And the most ultimate FU to the established, entrenched governmental bureaucracy was putting a guy named Donald Trump in because he purported to be someone who was going to disrupt the entire apple cart. And what you got was a new war with Iran that we shouldn't have been in the first place, $4 a gallon gasoline prices, increasing inflation to the rate that the previous guy did, and an FBI that is cheering on the FBI and a bunch of dumb people saying, you're not allowed to say things like we're not voting our way out of it, even though the evidence is completely obvious. You're not voting your way out of it. You voted for Epstein transparency. You voted for a closed border. You voted for the deportation of tens of millions of people illegally in your country, and you got none of it. So don't tell me you can vote your way out of it, but that's not a call for violence. Only a dipshit would think that. You would have to be a very low IQ person to think that the two options are vote your way out of it or fight your way out of it, because the alternative is wait it out and see what happens. And that is something I advocate for every single day here. When you feel violent, frustrated, irritated by the fact that you can't get what you want, the answer is work on the things you can control. You cannot control government. You cannot alter God's plan for whatever the planet is. You have no say in that, but you do have a say in what your faith looks like. You can work on that, and it's hard. So you can spend your whole life on it. You can work on taking care of your family and getting closer to them. It's something I'm going to do today. We're going to take care of my daughter, who's about to be 3. You can take care of your fitness, and I highly recommend it. There is no excuse for you to be fat and lazy and out of shape, whatever age you are. Start figuring out what it looks like to be fit. Eat foods that are good for you and do exercises that strengthen your body. Increase your range of motion, increase your cardiovascular endurance, increase your stamina. All of these things should be done daily. Yesterday, I went out and sprinted balls out for 3 miles on a treadmill, running uphill, and I averaged 6 minutes and 49 seconds per mile. And I am not a runner. I'm just a guy that knows how to run sometimes because I might need it. So I take my anger and the frustration of the stupidity that goes on in the world, and I put it on a treadmill, and then I go lift weights, and I go and blast my physical body, and I make myself stronger and harder so that when my family needs me, I'm available. And when things collapse around me, whatever that may be, whether it be at a national, an international, or just a local or regional level, I'm going to be more durable so that my family is protected. And then I work on firearm skills, which are not offensive, although they could be. So I do things that I can do that are within my control. There's nothing violent about any of those things. I have the ability to respond to violence, and I have trained for violence my whole life. I hope some of you start looking at that. But the alternative to voting your way out of this is not shooting your way out of this. It is preparing your way for the eventual whatever comes your way. And you can't predict it, and neither can I. And if the last 4 years have told me anything, it tells me that there is nothing that I predict that is going to happen that is 100% set in stone. The only thing I do know is that votes are not getting it done. So I'm going to prepare myself for the things that I actually can do. I can't change an election. I can't even get an elected representative. I can't even get a guy on the ballot after the primary that's not 82 years old in a place that's full of people that are otherwise sensible, because my neighbors are pretty sensible. How do you feel about that? Let's talk about a couple other things that you cannot change, unfortunately. One of the things you can't change, let's see this. You can't change your government at a national level. You can't change it at a state level. You can't even get poisonous chemicals pulled out of your water supply because you have zero say in that as well. There's a lot of things you don't have say. So what do? You act locally. Check out my friends over at Cove Pure. It's COVEPURE.com/Kyle, covepure.com/Kyle. Most people actually know that there's chlorine in their water and a bunch of other stuff. They shrug it off because they can smell it. It smells like they've been drinking a pool, but that's what they think is okay. The chlorine's there to keep you safe. Like so many other government things, it's there to keep you safe. So the problem isn't chlorine itself. It's that chlorine interacts with other things that are not regulated. Things like organic matter, particles from river, soil, plant matter, etc., that are going through the filtration process. If you guys have ever been to a water filtration plant, you'd actually be kind of shocked at how awesome it is and also how much crazy stuff is in there and how exposed it is to the air. All kinds of random things get into your water, and when chlorine interacts with them, it can turn them into a thing called THMs, which are probable human carcinogens known to disrupt gut and possibly cause cancer. The pictures you get at the store are not going to fix it. They can take the taste of chlorine out, but they're not going to filter out the THMs. If you guys want something that'll do that, check out Cove Pure. Their Clearwave reverse osmosis technology removes up to 99.9% of contaminants. It's not chlorine or PFAs or fluoride individually. It's all these things together. There's pharmaceutical products in there. Anything that your filtration system at your city or your county level is not designed to filter out, this is what you're getting locally. And the outside of it is you start off with something that doesn't taste like water, and you end up with something that tastes just like water. If you guys are seeing on the screen right now, what you can see is that it tells you how many dissolved solids, that's the raw dissolved, total dissolved solid number, and then it takes it down to whatever the purified water will have in it. And it'll go, in my case, from the 800 to 900 range of parts per million down to the single digits. So this is what you do. You're trying to filter out the junk and you want your water to taste like water. Mine usually tastes like it came out of the bottom of a boiler where you are boiling up broccoli. It tastes like sulfur. And so it's a massive change in just being able to hydrate yourself. Check out covepure.com/KYLE. Again, COVEPURE.com/Kyle. Right now, it's about $3.99. I think it's a 39% discount from their normal price. They're doing that while they've been having really good success at that price point. So they're just selling them out for the 250th. Good for them. Check it out. It's a great unit. It's very easy to set up. I'm a big fan. We'll go ahead and pivot away from there. And we'll continue talking about this. We haven't even done a single clip yet. So let me start making my argument to you. I've showed you a couple of little sort of definitions. I've showed you, I guess we did. We played AOC telling you. How about Jake Tapper saying the same thing about stochastic terrorism? I want you to hear people that we don't like. I don't like these people because I think they're dishonest. Why? Because they're politicians and they're in the media. And then I'm going to show you somebody that's purporting to be someone of high moral character and a position of authority. Here's Jake Tapper using that same phrase.
We in the United States need to fear more stochastic terrorism. In case you're not familiar with the term stochastic, it's defined as the public demonization of a person or a group that results in the incitement of a violent act, even without express orders to attack that person or group. When leaders, whether elected or in media or in a movement, when leaders claim that their opponents are pedophiles or Satanists or a part of a grand conspiracy to hurt you and your family, is anyone really surprised when somebody who hears this acts? What exactly do you think is going to happen? Journalism and jokes are not calls for violence. Calls for violence are calls for violence.
2022 versus 2026 Jake Tapper, put on by Maze Moore over on X, at Maze Moore. Great follow. Someone I subscribed to for the last couple years, maybe a year and a half or 2 years, because I want to put money into his pocket for the work that he does. And these clips are very, very good. 2022 Jake Tapper is talking about the danger of saying dangerous things. 2026 Jake Tapper is saying, hey, I say things that doesn't make me dangerous. The difference between people who do that kind of thing and what we do here is some people change their spots based on who's in office. And I don't. I've lost my access to people at Fox News. I don't have the ability to go out there and command a big media audience again. Why? Because I'm not willing to say things that are politically expedient for quote unquote my side, because my side is interested in freedom, accuracy, consistency, principles, constitutional liberties, really straightforward stuff. Free speech is free speech. I don't care who does it. Send me death threats. So be it. I don't like them. If you come and try to do a death threat on me, I will deal with you physically. If you send me mean words, I'll say those are mean words. But the end. I will ignore you. I'm a grown-up. I grew up in the 80s. When I was growing up, we learned things like sticks and stones, break your bones, words will never hurt you, right? That was the little rhyme they taught us. Why was that? Because physical violence is physical violence, and talking mean is talking mean. And I can stop listening to you and I can walk away, especially in the world of social media. I can turn you off. I can block your emails. I can send you to spam. I can stop listening to you for any reason. If somebody wants to show up, I'm physically prepared because I've used some of my preparation and my frustration with the current state to make myself resilient, more aggressive, physically capable of dealing with threats. That's my job. I'm always alert and aware. I don't like going places where there are people, but I do. And my head is on a swivel at all times. I don't have fun, generally speaking, when I'm out in public, because my job is to make sure that nobody hurts my family. And I don't know where the threat's going to come from. I don't know whether it's going to be a random act of violence that someone shows up and does. I don't know if the state's going to fail at that moment, or if someone's going to say, that looks like Seraphin, I'm going to try to hurt his daughter, in which case I'm going to put you through a window, or I'll put 5 rounds in your head and we'll put you on the ground. I do not care if you decide to come at me with words. I care about actual violence, and actual violence is decidedly different. People who cry about words are a danger in America, and they're a danger to the liberty, because especially when they represent official governmental policy or they are defending overreaching governmental authority. Now, before we get into this fun little game of call people who say that you can't vote your way out of it, which, by the way, I think is an objective assessment of the reality we currently live in, and you don't have to agree with me. That's what my words are, my opinion. I'm allowed to have one, and it turns out our founding fathers thought the same way. Did they vote their way out of their tyranny from King George? No, they killed their way out of it. And I'm not even advocating that. I just think that the system is naturally going to collapse because it is so far overextended. It has no ability to currently support itself. When I have to have a hearing a year after being sued, spending tens of thousands of dollars to defend myself, and then it continuing on, and then I have to ask a judge, hey, I'm not willing to spend any more money on attorneys. And I'm a relatively smart guy, and I've worked on the criminal justice side of the coin. I'd like to defend myself and make arguments that are reasonable. And I have to get a judge's permission. What was the alternative, by the way, to yesterday's hearing for me? That a magistrate judge says, I don't recognize your ability to not pay an attorney, so you must pay an attorney? Go fuck yourself. The judiciary is so out of its mind, it makes no sense at all. And when they're sitting here telling you that we may command you to spend your money to defend yourself, or worse, how about this? You're not allowed to bring up things like the Constitution when your name is Dexter Taylor and you want to defend yourself for possessing firearms that never left your home. And the Constitution says you have the right to keep and bear arms. But you can't bring that Constitution BS into my courtroom when a judge says that. Or worse, when a judge says you can't use the First Amendment to describe the First Amendment activities that you were engaged in on January 6th. That's not an acceptable defense in this courtroom. Then I know the system doesn't work, and I know it cannot work, and I know eventually it falls on itself. That's just an obvious thing to someone who's been paying attention for a couple of years. But that's not advocacy. That's just recognition of the pattern. The pattern is things keep getting worse. We elected Donald Trump in 2016. Our national debt was $19.95 trillion. It was less than $6 trillion at the turn of the century. It went up another $20 trillion since Donald Trump got into office the first time and the second time. We just hit $40 trillion. You're not going to vote your way out of that. Sorry, you can't. The currency has been devalued. The debt continues to climb. No matter who's in office, no matter who you put in, it doesn't matter if you get the Republican president you want, the Republican House majority, the Senate House majority, and a quote-unquote conservative Supreme Court majority. It is irrelevant because you still end up in a war for another country. You still end up with gas prices that are too expensive for most families. You still end up with people under 40 not being able to buy a new house, and both people working out of the house and not raising their own children. And lastly, you end up with a bunch of women celebrating a mother who objectively strangled her own children. And she's a hero. That's how effed up we are. That's not a voted out. That is a nation under judgment in a biblical context. And it is quite obvious to anyone that's paid attention. Now, the official position is, and I'm going to call it the unofficial official position. That's more accurate. A guy who just sat down with the FBI director indicated that people saying you cannot vote your way out of this is in fact a terrorist threat. And when you are a guy who is otherwise useless and had absolutely no remarkable career, you did functionally nothing for 20 plus years, and you sucked up as a government tick and got a paycheck for doing zero work that your agency does, then claiming credibility for having worked at that agency, and then the only reason that you're in contact with the current director of that FBI and the former deputy director of that FBI is because you picked a fight with me, little old me, who sits in a studio in a house in Williamson County, Texas, that I rent because I can't afford to buy a house, just like people younger than me can't afford to buy a house, because the house that I used to own is too expensive for me to even buy back, even though I make more money doing now what I used to do in the government, because that's how unaffordable things are. If your credibility comes from, I'm in opposition to Kyle Seraphin, who is speaking out against the same thing he was speaking out under the previous administration, that will be an official, unofficial statement and threat based on my assessments. And I can assess threats just as well as the government can. If you tell me that I'm a terrorist and the FBI could, should, or is investigating me, I'll take you seriously, because they've already done that. They did it under the previous administration when I did the same thing to the last guy. And interestingly enough, I'm going to play you a fun clip. I've got about 5 minutes of it. We'll break it up into pieces. In this clip, my former supervisor, who is a useless human being, he is a chubby, lazy, unoriginal thinker who did zero in his FBI career. I'm going to let you tell you what it is, and then I'm going to tell you what he said, so you understand that this man hasn't worked a case that was criminal, maybe ever. As far as I can tell, he never worked a single criminal case in the entire time he was in the FBI for 20 years. And he basically didn't work a non-criminal case for 17 of those years of his 20-year career. Before that, he was in law enforcement, and his job in law enforcement was he was a public affairs officer. He was the guy that went out and talked to people because he wasn't a doer of those things. And I remember him telling me one of his famous stories. His best law enforcement story was, one point, he saw a deer on the road that was dead or dying, and he shot it. We're going to get into who this guy is starting right freaking now. And let's start with somebody who's also discredited. Here's Daniel Bongino telling you about my former boss, Jonathan Nance. Is it John? Jonathan? I think it's just John.
Now, I wouldn't have given it much of the time of day if I hadn't seen FBI mouthpiece and Wolf Inside the Tent, the guy by the name of John Nance. Anytime you read a Nance story, you got to read it through the lens of who's telling Nance to say this. Well, notice how right in the title, he wants to take a shot at Kyle because he's jealous of Kyle. John Nance, again, I believe speaking as the FBI mouthpiece himself, says how he goes after Kyle by name. Wolves in the tent. Very cautious of these people. They're a group of dipwads who, I'm telling you, abuse our brand to go and destroy people because these people don't go through proper channels. Kyle used to work for this guy, and I believe this guy's upset because his face isn't on TV talking about FBI scandals he wants to be the face of because he's probably looking for more TV hits. So the fact that Kyle actually had the courage to give up his job because he wasn't going to get the COVID vax and fight for people really bothers this guy. Because Kyle's getting attention he don't like. So he's the wolf in the tent. Be very careful, these people.
Somebody used to know what this was all about. Now I'm going to play you the trailer for the movie Police State, which I helped create. I was a technical advisor on FBI matters. I gave the posture. I gave the blocking in some ways. I helped give the dialogue, a lot of the throwaway lines, and I helped make it sound like an FBI story. I was one of the guys that physically went in to the church scene. We helped do the arrest of the pastor. We made it legit by putting the handcuffs on in a way that made sense. I coordinated the action sequences. I put my hands on the guy who's standing at the table, who's sitting and praying with his family. I'm the one who gave him orders. I put him against the wall. I cuffed him in a way that was appropriate for the way the FBI does business so that it looked realistic because we wanted to show something real. What we wanted to show was when a government agency steps over its bounds and it starts affirming its own beliefs. When a government agency serves its own missions that are unrelated to the actual missions of protecting the American people from force and fraud, which is what they should do as a constitutional organization. So this is the hype video that was done by Dinesh D'Souza to sell this movie. The sad thing is this movie ended up saying Democrats are the bad guys. He completely missed the point. The point is that the government is the bad guys. And as a theoretically Republican who theoretically believes in small government, Dinesh D'Souza did a massive disservice on this movie because he acted like it was one political side of the aisle that did the issue, that did the things that were wrong. And the answer has always been that more government is the problem. There's a reason why I say things like the government is the worst solution to every problem, including when it might be the only one. And law enforcement is one of those places where it might be the only solution. But as we found out in the Durham report, the only way that you get the government's law enforcement to do a good job is to recruit people of high moral integrity, not pieces of shit like John Nance and not scumbags like Dan Bongino who failed in politics and wanted to grasp at the apple and wanted a little bit more power, who come back and then end up doing nothing but gatekeeping and purity testing for a movement that they claim to own, but they don't own. They're not even that conservative. Here's the movie Police State, at least the trailer. You guys get a taste of what it was that they were selling. This is the fear that was being sold in 2024.
We honor you, Father, for all that you've done for us.
Chief Division Counsel and DOJ have approved a no-knock breach. We want the subject to be on display, doing the walk of shame, full visual impact. Any questions?
Are we becoming a police state?
Government told American citizens they couldn't go to church on Sunday.
For the first time in my life, I'm saying to myself, am I going to get a knock at the door?
FBI warrant, come to the door now!
The Patriot Act and FISA were used against Donald Trump.
These individuals have commissioned the biggest propaganda play in U.S. history.
They don't go after the people that rigged the election. They go after the people that want to find out what the hell happened.
We don't need to have a crime. What we need is a person to look at. And then we go find out what crime you did.
FBI! Our focus is shifting. Our main priority as a bureau is going to be domestic terrorism.
It really paints anybody who's right of center.
If you're a pro-life, pro-family Catholic, they define you as radical.
These are anti-government.
We have freedom of religion and freedom of speech.
Violent extremists, and they must be dealt with. We can do anything we want.
It told a good story, but it told a really one-sided story. Like one side of the aisle was going to be the problem and we're going to be the solution if we could just get our guys in. How many people did you see that were in that movie that now have official positions in government? How many people had positions in government at that time and didn't do jack or shit? The Jim Jordan types. The Rand Pauls, if we're being honest. What have they done? Did they pick up the phone, call you back up when you need something? Did they say, hey, I really appreciate that you managed to basically give me my entire re-election campaign and it was based on pro-life Catholics? Is Jim Jordan a Catholic? I don't even know. But I know he never did anything for my family. Not one thing. And he didn't do anything for the pro-life Catholics either. He brought them on so he could get more Fox News hits. He spent some time with Garrett O'Boyle and Steve Friend. That's about it. These are the stories that were written by people like John Nance. This you can see here. Let me see if I can expand it out since I want to make sure we get it on the screen. The title is fantastic. There we go. Let me recenter this here for us. So, the story is FBI whistleblower. This is September 27th of 2022. This is a few days after I did my first interview with Daniel Bongino. FBI whistleblower, huckster or opportunist? Those are the two possibilities. I guess it's three. He's saying or. FBI whistleblower, question mark, huckster, question mark, opportunist, question mark. John Nance. John Nance, nobody who worked at the FBI and didn't do anything related to anything the FBI does. Have you ever worked with an individual who always is part of the problem, but is never part of the solution? You know the type, the new guy who's always convinced he has the answer to every organizational problem, even those about which he knows nothing. The funniest thing about seeing this is John Nance apparently was the smartest guy who never did anything in the entire history of the Bureau. He spent all of his time knowing things and doing jack and shit. He ended his FBI career hiding in his office on an offsite that didn't matter, doing a job that didn't need to be done. And somebody else essentially did his work for him. He was so poor at doing his operational supervision job that he actually got removed from his job and placed in a place where he couldn't make a mess. The funny thing is that when he left, we got a guy who actually understood what the mission was for our squad, for surveillance. We got a guy that was a former Ranger Battalion commander, a former HRT team leader, like a legit physical stud and a thinker and a tactician, a West Point graduate. And he said I was the most challenging person that he ever managed. Obviously, he's talking about me in this article. I was the most challenging person that my boss had ever managed after Nance, because he said, not only do I recognize all the problems and see where they fit in the scheme of things, I also bring him solutions And then I say, it's your job to pick the solutions. And he was like, it's very challenging to see somebody who knows what the problems are, sees solutions, brings them to you, and then says, whatever you want to do, boss, that's what we're going to do. But here's what I recommend and why. I did that for every problem. I never just saw problems and didn't recommend solutions. When I saw problems inside the FBI, I brought them to management. I started being a whistleblower in 2017, and I had less than a year on the job. And then this fat piece of shit writes these articles like this. And he really is. He's slow and sloppy. He speaks slowly, and I'm going to show you that in a moment. This is the loudmouth who's convinced he's undertasked and underappreciated by management, who, if they were only wise enough to recognize his obvious talent and prowess, would forthwith harness his genius and raise him to a station befitting the magnitude of his hubris. A person who demonstrates the aptitude for sowing discord, carelessly propagandizing colleagues with an avalanche of enumerated self-inflicted grievances drawn relentlessly by the gravity perceived affronts to their neglected and overlooked talents. I can tell you, as someone who worked with John Nance, he was one of the most unimpressive human beings you would ever find. The best thing about him, because he was the best boss that I had of the two that I had at that time, was that he didn't get in my way, didn't bother me, and didn't actually affect my mission. And when I called him out, he usually just demurred. Hey man, where are our rifles that were purchased 6 months ago? We're going out on terrorist cases and you're briefing us that the guy that we're going up against has a freaking AK and a bunch of buddies that want to use AKs. Where are our guns? And he was like, well, they're working on it. No, what are you doing to work on it? Oh, well, nothing. I'm waiting until they bring it to us. The laziest fat piece of shit who was a cop, and he immediately sought a position where he didn't have to do work. I'm going to now play you who John Nance is in his own words. And the funniest thing about this, and this guy wrote article after article, then he puffed up Steve Friend, then he said Steve Friend was a problem, then he went and said Nikki Parker was amazing, then he went and said that Marcus Allen is amazing. Marcus Allen, who talks to me and doesn't speak, has never once spoken to John Nance. The incredible thing about this interview that was on Gary Melton's channel last night is that he tells you what his career was, and his career is actually, it involves less of the FBI's actual mission than mine, and I only worked there for 6 years, which he described as getting a cup of coffee. Are we ready for this? Because I am.
Yeah, sure. So as you said, my name's John Nance. I'm a retired supervisory special agent with the FBI, so I did 20 years with the Bureau.
When you describe yourself as a retired supervisory agent, that means that you are desperate to have the credibility that comes with being a supervisor. What we used to say for the folks that were working in the brick side of things, which is to actually do the work, is that they were supervisory special administrators, because you're no longer being an agent anymore. Your job is in an office. You're not doing what an FBI agent does.
Started out in Miami, working counterintelligence. I really enjoyed that.
He worked counterintelligence. He really enjoyed that. Let me now give you the career arc of the 20 years. For the first maybe 3 years, he worked counterintelligence, which was as much time as I worked in counterintelligence, and I freaking hated it. It's the shittiest work the FBI has for a new agent. It's slow, it's stupid, and it's not involving criminal arrests. So he did that for about 2 or 3 years. Then he moved immediately to a surveillance team. The surveillance team is where most people went because they didn't want to do work. They wanted to sit in a car and not have to do any casework. For me, it was the only way to get out of a counterintelligence job that sucked. Maybe that was the case for John as well. But then the next thing he does is he goes to a protective detail where he babysat Eric Holder, and he ran around. And by the way, while he was on the counterintelligence team, he was working SWAT because they take anybody who wants to run around and dress up and pretend to be a soldier. So he pretended to be in the military, and he had pictures of himself in camouflage on his desk. He also had pictures of Eric Holder on his desk. First 3 years, doing bullshit, not criminal work. Then he went to be a surveillance guy. Then he ends up on a protective detail, and then he never went back to doing casework. He went back to being a surveillance guy, being a surveillance supervisor, and he ended his career sitting in an office, in his own words to me, hiding from accountability for not taking the COVID shot. Here's your 20-year career.
And then did ground surveillance, also did dignitary protection. I actually did dignitary protection for Eric Holder for about 3.5 years. A lot of people don't realize that the Bureau does dignitary protection only for 2 people, for the director of the FBI and his immediate boss, the Attorney General. And then
until now, because now they do it for a girl who is the friend of the FBI director. They do it for the multiple co-deputy directors and the FBI director, plus the Attorney General. So there you got that.
Moved back to doing surveillance operations, and then ended my career with the Bureau supervising the ground surveillance squad.
While he did that, we had an Asian female who weighed about 100 pounds. She was about 5 feet tall, who thought she was as strong as a man. And he built her a gym, a CrossFit gym, in our hangar where we worked, where nobody else ever showed up. And he and she spent every day together, went to every meal together. And then she eventually lost her marriage due to infidelity. She was married to a real cop, and she betrayed him by running around with him with somebody. Maybe somebody at her gym. I don't know if it happened at work or if it was somewhere else. She got away with murder, by the way, because she did his job, because he sat around and watched Fox News.
And then the aviation surveillance squad for Washington field office. About 6.
The aviation squad was essentially run by a contractor who did all the maintenance on all the planes, and the pilots who self-managed all their own airtime. He basically signed off on what their paychecks were, and he signed off on what the amount of money that he had to spend to repair the planes that he didn't have any experience in. He was neither a pilot, nor was he an air traffic controller, nor did he have any understanding of aviation. He was a guy that rubber stamped spending by a contractor that used to be in the Navy that was an absolute stud. And by the way, that stud lost his job under the previous administration as a whistleblower. He was a really good guy. He reached out to me. It was actually when Kash Patel got in, he got bumped out while Patel was there, but it was the previous administration that kicked him out, and he's not been restored.
2.5 years of local law enforcement prior to the Bureau, and
where he was a
little bit of
officer.
law school, graduated from law school.
He went to night school while he was a cop because he was so dedicated to being a stud cop that he went to law school. He's never been a lawyer, and he's never actually sat for the bar, which is the classic FBI move. Go to law school, don't become a lawyer, and then use that to get you into an FBI job. That's what he did. He was a shitty cop doing a public affairs job who had a degree as a lawyer. If you guys ever want to know how to get to it, go be a cop and then go to night school.
As well to the mix. So that's kind of me.
Deeply, deeply unimpressive to anybody who's ever worked in the FBI. Less impressive than me. And I spent 6 years there.
On a thumbnail sketch.
All right. So that's the first little spot from his introduction.
I don't blame people for feeling that way.
The question is doesn't the FBI have a credibility problem? Which is why we made a movie called Police State. And the answer is obviously, of course it does. Before we get into it, which we'll get right back to, let's go ahead and break and let you know that if you're watching on Rumble and you're feeling some of the angst today, yeah, go ahead and give us a like. Give us a like on YouTube if you like as well. You can subscribe to either way. If you want to join us over on locals at KyleSeraphin.com, you can find all of our sponsors over there, and we'll insert an audio ad right now. You'll hear that on the audio platforms like Apple and iHeartRadio and Spotify. You can also find us at KyleSeraphinShow.com if you are so inclined to find that. All right, I'm going to have to fast forward through the video of him introducing himself. We'll get back to that little blank.
Yeah, sure. So as you said, my name's John Nance.
I like the yeah, sure for some reason. I don't know why that makes me laugh, but it does. All right, let's see if we can get to the question.
The ground, about 6.5 years of local. Well, look, I don't blame people for feeling that way. During the bad old days of the Biden administration, James Comey's directorship, and
I want you to hear what he just said. During the bad old days of Biden and Comey. Now, he's probably confused because he's getting old. But when Biden was in, it was actually not Comey. It was Chris Wray. But we're talking about an old retired guy with a gray beard. So we'll give him a break for being old and not knowing what the timeline looks like. Let's also consider, as he gets into this, he just said the bad old days of Comey. Let's just take him at his word. He's going to go back and say that the Bureau was always great in a minute. I don't want you to forget that he just said that.
And Christopher Wray as well. I mean, the Bureau was involved in very widely known, infamous cases like Crossfire Hurricane that targeted a presidential candidate based on nothing more than a dossier that we now know was completely fabricated and was paid for by Hillary Clinton proxies. So
you have a government agency that took political oppo research and then tried to investigate and discredit a current president and eventually the candidate and then president of the United States. The answer to that question is, should the FBI exist? The answer obviously is no. It shouldn't exist because of that. That alone should be enough to disqualify you. Hey, you tried to overturn election results in the United States of America. That's fundamentally disruptive to the thing we're trying to do here. Unless you can't vote your way out of this, unless you can't actually do that sort of thing. Just want to say, Crossfire Hurricane in and of itself would have been enough to say, you know what? Maybe we have to do without these people, even though not everybody's to blame. Send the good ones out to other agencies. It's got to be gone.
People are right to be skeptical. And I think that's been a big part of Kash Patel's drive. Initially, I was a bit of a skeptic with regard to the social media presence that Patel has had, that the
just remember that
FBI has had. But the more I watch it, the more I like it.
Because it's brought him into a space where people can hear what he has to say, and he thinks his shit is very important. This is the loudmouth who convinced he's undertasked and underappreciated by management or maybe the rest of the world, who, if they were only wise enough to recognize his obvious talent and prowess, would forthwith harness his genius and raise him to a station befitting the magnitude of his hubris. It's almost like John wrote that about himself.
American people are right. I understand the skepticism, but people have to understand, they have to temper that. They have to understand that this is Trump's FBI.
Remember that he said this. We now have the old bad days of the Biden FBI with Comey and Wray. Now we have Trump's FBI, if you believe that bullshit, which you shouldn't, because we just covered an entire terrorism case that is identical to all these things.
This is Kash Patel's FBI. A healthy sense of skepticism is great, but a pervasive pessimism, and the nothing is happening crew and this propaganda that we're seeing that's developing is not healthy. And it is not an accurate perspective of what's going on at the FBI now.
Ready?
Nor was it accurate of the FBI previous to Patel.
Okay, so what you're saying is that the FBI has always been great. What did Daniel Bongino, 292, prior to being 292, have to say? Oh, this is an FBI propagandist and mouthpiece for a government agency.
The vast majority of people that I served with took their oaths very seriously.
Oh, did they?
And were very conscientious of civil liberties and had a high regard for the Constitution. Patel said...
It's shocking to hear you say that, Johnny. Because it's pretty clear they didn't. Because 6,000 FBI employees were involved in investigations into January 6th, and none of them seemed to do the thing that I was doing, which is that I'm willing to take all those cases and dismiss them. I kept probably 100 plus people from being visited by the FBI by deleting the leads because there was no allegation or information there was a federal crime involved. How many other people did that? How many other people just turned and knocked on the door and said, I'm with the FBI. Did you like to incriminate yourself? Can we do some bad things for you? But those people took their oaths really seriously. Per John Nance, who basically worked by himself. Let me just say this. 2018, he left in 22. He'd been there for 5 years-ish. He spent 15 years of his FBI career not working in an actual field office. He might have spent 17 years of the 20 years not working in a field office. When you're in a surveillance squad, you work out of an offsite where you're around like a dozen people, tops. When you're working on a security detail, you're working around maybe a dozen, maybe 18 people, and you're working shift work with a bunch of SWAT guys traveling around the globe with some political figure. When you're working in the next surveillance squad, you're working in an offsite. There were about a dozen plus people there. When you're working as the aviation supervisor, you're on a squad with 5 people. They're pilots and they're flying. They're not around you. He basically didn't work around the FBI at all.
This on Joe Rogan, and I think about this quite often.
He's now going to tell you that Kash Patel did a good job on Joe Rogan. Here we go.
He said that he was shocked at how high functioning the FBI actually was when he first got there, and how a small group of individuals at the headquarters level could produce such mayhem and have such an impact on what the Bureau does and on the perception of what the FBI does.
He's such a shitty deliverer of information. So allow me to just interject this. That's when Kash Patel got captured. For those of you who are always asking, oh man, how did it happen? Like he was saying all this stuff and then he showed up, and then where was the museum to the deep state? Where was the getting rid of the intelligence components? Where was the doing the work of declassification? Kash Patel showed up and was immediately captured by an agency that convinced him that they were high functioning and they were a few bad apples. That was the bubble wrap. The bubble wrap happened immediately. And I pointed it out when it happened, and I was the bad guy. I became the bad guy because I can see what is so obvious. And the reason I can see what's obvious is I've had a higher IQ than John my whole life. I've always been smarter than John. I had a full academic scholarship while John was being a beat cop and shooting deers and trying to be a public affairs officer while going to a shitty night school. This guy is a low IQ person. He's always been a low IQ person. He's low energy. He's low interest. He's low fitness. He has zero pride in his actual appearance. He wandered around in a freaking flannel shirt because he thought that was what cool guys did. And he thought he was cool because he was on a SWAT team that had no standards. You know how I know they had no standards? Because John Nance was on it. This unimpressive lump. You'd hate to see if this guy was actually shaved all the way down with no goatee. He's a chinless goof. And he's telling you the FBI was really high functioning and great. And it was always great. But this is a new FBI because this is Trump's FBI and this is Patel's FBI. And everybody else who says otherwise is propaganda. Pot, kettle.
So I hope that answers your question. I hope that answers your viewers' questions to some degree. Patel has got the ship going in the right direction.
That's why we have so many Epstein arrests, right? That's why we have all the people that were on the government gangster list. Look, I have a stack of playing cards that says government gangsters on it with Kash Patel getting out of a flipping helicopter. How many people at the back of that book in the indexes were arrested? 2? It was Bolton. Pathetic. Bolton, who was part of the Trump administration, Bolton? Right. And then who else? Jim Comey. Did they get him for being a government gangster and for doing all kinds of subversive stuff and investigating a president? No. They got him because he put a picture of shells up on Instagram.
And people should be optimistic about that.
I'm telling you what you should think. And what you should think is you should be optimistic about how amazing this is. Here's the next cut.
I think it's primarily on X.
This is when he accuses anybody who says what my title of this program is of being a terrorist. And this should concern you because this is exactly what the FBI does. And it turns out we made a whole movie about what the FBI does when they start policing speech. And he just sat down for an hour plus and multiple hours of hanging out with the FBI director, access that a nobody who was a shitty supervisor that did nothing for 17 of his 20 years has any business being involved in. He popped in and did an interview as a bullshit journalist who writes these opinion pieces that are essentially, I hate Kyle Seraphin, and won't you look at me? I write a lot of adjectives in my sentences. This goofball is telling a man that there is a propaganda campaign on X, Twitter, and you can tell who he's talking about. By the way, he's talking about people like me, Tom Massey, Marjorie Taylor Greene. They get into going after Joe Kent, all people that he doesn't even have the credibility to even touch their bootstraps. And I'll start with my own. John can't even freaking lace my boots, probably because he can't even bend over because of his belly.
I mean, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram too.
I'm an old guy, so I'm on LinkedIn.
But from my perspective, I think it's primarily on X, where
the administration spends all their time, where we've outed people who worked for the FBI that didn't belong there and got up to 40 people fired with things that we've written about. Stuff that me and the Suspendables have pointed out. Yeah, it's primarily on X where the propaganda happens.
Really see that information type stuff happening. So I think
a dude who worked on counterintelligence somewhere in the early 2000s is going to let you know. Here it goes.
The Bureau is trying to do that. Now, are you asking me, do I think there are open investigations on individuals or whatever? I would hope so. I would hope so for particular individuals, but
boot in mouth. I would hope that the government is investigating people. And what are they investigating for? Words. The same thing that AOC was cheering on, that Jake Tapper was cheering on.
Those would be very sensitive cases, what are termed SIM cases, a sensitive investigative matter. That's not exactly a classification. It's kind of a handling instruction. So those things are kept very, very close hold. So I think there are people out there that are.
He just described what a SIM was, which is something that I went over. He's recovering territory that I went over in my first interview with Bongino. Almost to the same words. I just delete it?
Yeah, sure. So as you said, my name's John Nance. FBI actually was when he first got there. I think it's primarily on X. Okay, I mean, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram too, LinkedIn also. But from my perspective, I think it's primarily.
Guys, I think this guy should actually take over the show. He's freaking riveting, right?
Early on X, where I really see that information type stuff happening. So I think the Bureau is trying to do that. Now, are you asking me, do I think there are open investigations on individuals or whatever? I would hope so. I would hope so for particular individuals, but those would be very sensitive cases, what are termed SIM cases, a sensitive investigative matter. It's not exactly baseball. A classification. It's kind of a handling instruction. So those things are kept very, very close hold. So I think there are people out there that are actually seditious.
Didn't they go after the Proud Boys for being actually seditious?
And I've used this phrase before. If you hear somebody say, we can't vote our way out of this.
Oh,
okay. That's a red flag.
Mm-hmm.
And what that is that's a technique.
No, it's a phrase. It's just a sentence that grown-ups can assess with their own opinion, and they can say, we're not going to vote our way out of this because we tried to vote our way out of this, and obviously we didn't vote our way out of this. But it's a technique. Here comes highly sophisticated bullshit.
Demoralization.
Yes, it's stochastic terrorism.
Excuse me? You call me a terrorist? Fucking pussy.
Stochastic terrorism, rather, technique. And what it's designed to do is eliminate the logical objections to political violence, right? I mean, what?
Right? No, it's meant to recognize the current state of affairs, which is that there was an attempt and a belief that you could vote your way out of it. And the obvious answer is you cannot. Everybody likes to do this on social media too. They're like, what are you suggesting? They're like, why do you think I'm suggesting something? What I'm doing is recognizing the state of play. If the dog takes a shit in the living room and I say, there is shit in the living room, and you're like, and what are you going to do about it? It's like, I didn't say I was going to do anything about it. If it's my living room, maybe I'll clean it. If it's not my living room, maybe I'll alert somebody to the presence of it. If I don't want to step in it and I don't have time, I'll just let you know so you don't step in it. There's a lot of options when you make a statement that assesses the truth of the ground situation. There are IEDs on the road. What are you going to do about it? I'm like, well, maybe I do nothing. Maybe I'm going to call EOD. Maybe I'm going to avoid the road. Maybe I'm going to just prepare myself and find a different route. Just because I say we can't vote our way out of it doesn't mean that there's an implied action plan, unless you're a dipshit, one-dimensional guy who's going to go out there and start an investigation, which is what it indicates from this. This is a threat from a guy who just sat with the FBI director. It's stochastic terrorism. Fucking lefties.
What's being left unsaid if you say we can't vote our way out of this?
Yeah, what is? Now let's do the logical thing. Let's try to figure out something else. There's shit in the living room. What's being left unsaid? It stinks. I don't want to step in it. You're ruining your carpet.
What's the alternative, right? It's political violence. Well,
that sounds like something you would like. You'd be the first one to go because you're weak.
Individuals that are involved in that are seditious. And frankly, I mean, if I was running the Bureau's counterintelligence program,
what would you do?
I'd be really interested in what those people were doing in their association. I'd love to see a link chart.
I would too.
That's one of the things, that I miss about being, in the Bureau. The Bureau's really good at that stuff. I don't want to.
The Bureau's really good at that stuff. To be fair, John Nance never did any of that stuff. If anybody was wondering, like, hey, how many link charts did John Nance put together of connections of people that were involved in seditious conspiracies for stochastic terrorism? The answer is explicitly zero. I can definitively say that. None. Do you know why? Because he hasn't worked a case in 25 years. 21 years. Whatever. He worked for a couple of years on a counterintelligence squad in Miami. They primarily went after people that were going to be either Russian, Chinese, and then what they call global. Those are the big pieces. And global is Iran, it's Israel, it is Cuba, it's North Korea, if there happens to be. Generally speaking, an office like Miami is big enough that they'll actually have a couple of breakout squads. So I don't know if he specialized in one particular thing or another. I specialized in non-criminal activity of classified collections that the Chinese government was doing on non-U.S. Clearance holders. They were just people who were talking to people in a way that is 100% legal. Literally, the stuff that we were, quote unquote, investigating on my squad involved zero crime. No allegations of crime even. And if it did become something that we were like, oh, I think there might be a crime here, someone else took it. There was a whole squad of 9 of us with a supervisor that did nothing but look into non-criminal actions by a government that was doing things that they're allowed to do in this country. But they make really good link charts.
Get into too much detail, but you know, a link chart with regard to some of these people would be fascinating to see. So, I think that the Bureau in particular is trying to do some things. Yeah, sure.
The Bureau in particular is trying to do some things. They're trying to investigate some stochastic terrorists who are seditious, and you're using real specific words the previous administration. But remember, this is Kash Patel's organization. This is Donald Trump's FBI. So when they look into sedition, it's not the same as the previous guys who went after sedition. These are some pretty impressive claims. And I would otherwise not listen to it because it doesn't really matter that much. He's just like some old guy that retired and didn't do shit in his career, and he's trying to have some relevance. No question in my mind, that's what he's trying to do. He'd like to have an audience. He really wants to be a writer. He wants to get paid to be a writer because he clearly can't deliver a message on camera that anybody gives a shit about. And most of you are probably asleep right now. So wake up. Sorry about all that. What's fascinating to me is that he has proximity and access to the director of the FBI, despite no reason for him to do that. There should be zero connection. But the reason he has a connection is this.
Now, I wouldn't have given it much of the time of day if I hadn't seen FBI mouthpiece and wolf inside the tent, the guy by the name of John Nance. Anytime.
Bongino used to know. He spent 30 minutes. He called me on the phone or we texted back and forth. I can't remember exactly the way that it interchanged. I said, my former boss just wrote a hit piece on me after me showing up on your show. And he's like, I'm going to roast the guy. I'm going to destroy him on my radio show. He did it more than once for 30 plus minutes at a time. He showed that John Nance, back when he was my boss, was sending Daniel Bongino desperate letters. I'd like to come work for you. My wife needs a job. She'd like to be a writer. Do you need anybody to work in your news service? Do you need anybody to work for the Bongino Report? One agent to another, I'd like to say these things to you. I wanted to shake your hands and say what a great job you're doing. Dick sucking, knob slobbery 2018. It goes back a long ways. John Nance wanted to be somebody. That was 8 years ago. He didn't retire until 22. What a freaking joke of a human being. And his only claim to fame is he's a guy that doesn't like me, and he's got the inside scoop on how I'm not a good guy to the people who I am calling out for being the exact same garbage that they always were. He did call out some stuff from Joe Rogan and how awesome Kash Patel was on Joe Rogan. That's when I first recognized that he was amazing. That Joe Rogan was doing a great interview of this incredible FBI director who's changed everything and turned it around and realized it was just a small number of people that were the bad apples instead of an entire agency that's been doing bad things for its entire existence, which is not shocking to you guys. All right. We're going to leave a little blank right here. If you guys are listening on the audio platforms, Apple, iHeartRadio, Spotify, you are being blessed with not having to see the lazy, slow-talking face of my former boss, who's out there making allegations that by listening to this, you're probably a stochastic terrorist. Go ahead and give us a like on Rumble and on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel if you're so inclined, if you'd like to find yourself on the wrong side of a government list. We should call it the watch list, the people that watch this program. The watch list, something we talked about a long time ago. We've been screwed with by the Bureau for a long time, so be it. No big deal. You may hear an ad on the audio platforms right now. And I'll leave that space. Yeah, John Nance, who suckled up to Julie Kelly, Democrat donor. Julie Kelly, that one? Yeah. All right. So let's do some other fun things. Let's go to Kash Patel talking about how we knew that he was full of shit. This is just a great little supercut that I made of him talking to Joe Rogan, mixed in with the stuff that he said to Stu Peters, because he's a liar. But liars love liars. That's why they end up in government jobs.
Did Jeffrey Epstein kill himself? Who killed Jeffrey Epstein?
This doesn't look right. It doesn't look like a suicide. And so the way, based on public information at the time, that he ended up put the pictures and him hanging himself, I was like, man, that guy killed himself.
What did you think before you got in office? Did you think that Epstein was murdered?
No.
No suspicion at all of it?
This doesn't look right. It doesn't look like a suicide. But I have a different background, right?
Right.
So I was a public defender back in the day. When you're in that kind of confinement, we call it solitary confinement, you're not supposed to have these things that you are able to hang yourself with. That's the whole point of the strict rules in there. You're not supposed to have 6 feet of cloth that you can dangle from the ceiling so you can hang yourself. This is prison 101. I used to spend a lot of time in jails and a lot of time in segregated housing units, SHUs as we call them, right? So I've spent a lot of time in federal detention facilities as a public defender before, talking to my clients, so I kind of know how those work. And I know how you get in, how you get out, who works the system. He was in isolation. He was in a unit where he's in there not just to protect himself, but he's in there to protect the rest of the prison population because he was such a high profile case. And so, and I've known people that have committed suicide in these cells. In these units, there's supposed to be 24/7 guard duty on him directly.
By the way, do you guys think that there's any chance Kash Patel knows anybody that has committed suicide in a government SHU, in a special housing unit under government control? Because that's a real big freaking scandal. There's almost no doubt in my mind. Like I've been trying to figure out if we can find the records on this, but I want to know how many public defenders or how many people that he defended as a public defender killed themselves in a SHU, a federal government SHU. I'm going to bet the answer is none. But he lies like breathing, and he's not a very good liar anyway.
There's just no way that you could have run an op. The guard fell asleep. Now, I don't really buy that.
Why not?
But it's almost impossible to prove otherwise unless you can obtain the videotape. Well, it's hard to surmise that from a video. And usually there isn't video looking into people's cells for a lot of reasons.
Yeah. Yeah, except we heard out that there was, in fact, video, and then you guys tried to put it out there, and then you were still missing minutes.
And had people go into that cell and not have any video of it, and not have any people come out and say, hey, yeah, I saw that guy. He shouldn't have been there, the guard or this guy.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but what I was told, what I'd read, was that the guards were not paying attention or were sleeping.
The guard fell asleep. Now, I don't really buy that. Well, it's hard to surmise that from a video, right? Like,
right.
Where they and look, do guards doze off on the night shift? Yeah.
What did you think before you got in office? Did you think
Epstein killed himself? Yeah, it depends on when you ask me. How about Bongino? What did he have to say about all this stuff? Did he go in after a couple of months and then recognize that somebody was a problem who wasn't buying their bullshit? And then figure out, can we recruit this dipshit Nance?
The place has taken a reputational hit. There is zero question about it. There were a lot of bad actors. One of them still out there causing us all kinds of trouble. One of them still out there causing us all kinds of trouble. One of them still out there causing us all kinds of trouble. So we had to fix it and rebuild public trust. One of the ways to do it is these cases of significant public interest that matter.
Yeah, you know what those cases were? Cocaine in the White House? Failure. Dobbs decision leak? Failure. Pipe bomber? Failure. Cases of significant public interest. Who's a person that's been calling these a-holes out from the beginning? Yeah. Why? Because I recognize when you get captured, when you immediately apparently walked in there and you were shocked. It was so good. It was really just a great organization. You had no idea. It was just full of all these honorable, great men and women. Yeah, it was obvious to me. It was also obvious by the people that you made. Remember that one dude who came in and he said, personnel is policy. The people you choose are the people that you are actually promoting because of what they're all about. Yeah, I remember it too. For anybody that was paying attention, it was really obvious to us that they fell down on the job because they moved the wrong people into positions. Here's Kash Patel telling you why. Even though he was in a movie called Police State, which 100% focused in on the fact that the FBI weaponized against conservatives who were just the target du jour because they were convenient, because they were quote unquote threats under militia violent extremists or anti-government, anti-authority violent extremists, or I wonder whatever this stochastic terrorist claim is. Information war violent extremists, anti-FBI violent extremists, or whatever Nance wants to call us. I'm sure there's a category, by the way. It'll come out at some point. They did a whole movie about how J6ers were terrorized and that could be anybody. And then we saw this. And if anybody wasn't paying attention by the time this interview came out, and you didn't see it then you'll never see it. And you'll just wait until these idiots get arrested by the next group, which will come in and turn around and immediately weaponize on them. The funniest thing is thinking that you're in charge of the animal, when in fact the animal has always had its own mind. The FBI is a crocodile. You can put it on a leash and you can give it things that are convenient to eat, and it'll do so because it's convenient. And then you can let it off the leash and it'll devour you in your bed while you sleep. That's what it'll do. It always ends up coming for people that are a problem. Which is probably why they're investigating us right now.
But you promoted Stephen Jensen, the architect of the FBI's overzealous January 6th investigation.
I want the American public to realize what we did. That man was in a position where he literally fought back against the machine who was saying, we want to politicize this event. We want to politicize this event.
He literally pushed back when the management said we want to politicize it. And so he literally pushed back, but, there's a chain of command and he followed orders. Do you remember why I don't have a job, guys? It's because I don't follow orders, because I think I know the right answer, because I know what's right and wrong. And I don't give a shit if somebody in my agency tells me that I should be loyal to the agency, because I'm not. And I never was. It was always just a job. It was always a job that could be taken away. And so the things that define me were never the job, unlike John Nance, who leads off with, I was a supervisory special agent. That makes me a GS-14. All that means is that you didn't do casework. And if you didn't do that after a long career of actually doing cases, then nobody gives a shit what you think, and you were respected at a very low level, which I will tell you is very much the case. Okay, let's find out about Steve Jensen. What he literally pushed back.
And at the end of the day, remember, Maria, there's a chain of command here.
That's right.
So you can fight back your chain of command to a certain degree before they fire you.
Yes, and if you are an honorable person, then you get fired and you move on. That's why I sit here.
And Steve Jensen and other folks were promoted because they embody what the American public demands of FBI agents.
Following freaking orders. Do what you're told. Go and kick down the door because a family's praying and breakfast and Christians are the problem. Well, Christians aren't the problem anymore. Now we're going after radical lefties, so we're going to knock them down. Guess what? We're going after people that speak out against the government. We're going to go and knock that door down. We're going to go after stochastic terrorists who are saying things that we don't like. Mean words equal violence because we're a bunch of pussies, because we're a bunch of leftists. If you guys don't think that the political right has moved, the media version of the political right has not moved to being talking about stochastic terrorism, allow me to share this. September 10th, 2025, the day that Charlie Kirk was killed. Charlie Kirk being assassinated is the American Reichstag fire. It's time for a complete crackdown on the left. What? Every Democratic politician must be arrested and the party banned under RICO. 3 million views on this post, guys. This is not a small thing. Every libtard commentator must be shut down. Stochastic terrorism, they caused this. That is called a reaction, an emotional reaction that got 28,000 likes and 3 million eyeballs on it. This used to be reserved for people like Keith Olbermann, who are basically aging lesbian leftist commentators. This is instructive to see that idiots like Clay Travis, J.D. Vance, Senator Tuberville, Eric Erickson, Mike Collins of Georgia, who have laughed at our warnings and pleas against stochastic terrorism, then suddenly believe stochastic terrorism. Joe Biden sent the orders. Today is not an isolated incident. The rhetoric led to the attempted assassination of Donald Trump from J.D. Vance. That was on July the 13th of 24, when Trump got shot at Butler. Here's Sarah Adams. I generally like Sarah Adams. I don't agree with a lot of the things she says. She's talking about stochastic terrorism. How rhetoric creates pathways to violence. That's a very feminine leftist thing to say. That's an analytical person who works at the CIA kind of thing to say. Here's Bill Madden, hard left. There's something seriously wrong with Elon Musk. This is in November of 24. Alexander Vindman is a patriot. That's bullshit. No, he's not. Treating to over 600 million followers is the very definition of stochastic terrorism. Talking about Vindman being on the payroll of Ukrainian oligarchs, committing treason. You're allowed to have words. You're allowed to have opinions. In America, you should be able to say things. That's my position. Here's Max Nordau talking about Piker being guilty of stochastic terrorism. Hassan Piker, who's come into the news of late. And here's Hassan Piker claiming that Laura Loomer is being a stochastic terrorist.
Conservative activist Laura Loomer posted this weekend, quote, "One of these days, Hassan Piker is going to talk bleep to the wrong person, and then I'm going to make that person..."
Dude, they're getting unbelievably shameless. I mean, this is
This is no longer just like a slander smear operation. They're just actively highlighting people putting a hit out on me. That is crazy.
And this is the man many Democrats continue to be seen with. Francesca Hong, Abdul El-Sayed, Bernie Sanders, AOC, Ilhan Omar, and more.
I mean, the question is pretty simple. Like, if I were to say what Laura Loomer said about me, about Rick Scott, I would get a call from Secret Service. It's very clear what she's saying, and it's also very clear that Republicans have basically unlimited bandwidth to say whatever they want about their political opposition.
Pretty hilarious, right? Both sides of the coin accusing the other of speech equals violence, that your speech is actually inspiring violence, and therefore you are responsible for someone doing some dipshit, idiotic, dangerous thing because you said something that somebody else thought, oh, well, that's inspirational, I'm going to go do it. The fact that I have a podcast today entitled, "We Can't Vote Our Way Out of This," it's intentional. It's provocative. It's also accurate. We cannot vote our way out of this. I 100% believe that. It's my opinion, and I'm allowed to have it. To call that terrorism is because you're a low IQ, shitty, failed government employee doing a propaganda op that the prior FBI deputy director used to recognize. Here's more. Andy Ogles talking about it, talking about stochastic terrorism. The left spent years claiming Republicans were guilty of stochastic terrorism for expressing strong political opinions. Now, a former FBI director appears to openly endorse assassinating the president, and they say nothing. Right. Because they don't have any standard. They have double standards, but so does the left. The left and the right are the same in this case, which is why you can't vote your way out of it. This isn't politics. It's stochastic terrorism. It's a picture of Joe Biden being bound up in the back of a trunk. This was something that was on the back of somebody's pickup truck, and it looked funny, and Donald Trump thought it was great, so he posted an image of somebody posting a meme on the back of the freaking truck, and that's stochastic terrorism, because they're inspiring someone to kidnap the president and put him in the back of a pickup truck, even though he's guarded by the Secret Service. All of these people are completely out of their effing minds. Here's Jim Stewartson, who won the lawsuit against Kash Patel because he called him a googly-eyed chud or something like that. The governor of Florida wants you to know that it's okay to run over protesters with your car if you feel threatened. That's not actually what DeSantis said. What he said was common sense, even though it was a little bit flamboyant. This is stochastic terrorism, intentionally planting violent ideas into a population with knowledge it would lead to death. No, what it says is that if you try to threaten our families, maybe we'll run you over because don't be in front of my family. Here's what they actually said, just as an example of stochastic terrorism from the political left, the cry of this, the same thing that Johnny Nance was just saying.
And we also have a policy that if you're driving on one of those streets and a mob comes and surrounds your vehicle and threatens you, you have a right to flee for your safety. And so if you drive off and you hit one of these people, that's their fault for impinging on you. You don't have to sit there and just be a sitting duck and let the mob grab you out of your car and drag you through the streets. You have a right to defend yourself in Florida.
That seems pretty straightforward. If you surround my truck or my car, I'm going to run you over too. If I've got my babies in there, I can accurately, based on my training and my experience in life, tell you what a deadly force threat looks like. It is not difficult for me to do. I can articulate that you surrounding my vehicles present an imminent danger of death or serious physical injury to myself or to the little children that are sitting behind me, and I'll run your ass over in a heartbeat if you want to block me in, block my right of way of escape, and then sit there and be pounding on my glass. I might shoot you through the glass, too, for whatever it's worth. And that's not terroristic. That's called defending your family. This is not complicated stuff. So the governor of Florida saying that's not stochastic terrorism, but it sounds about the same as someone saying, if you don't agree with our version of the FBI and you're saying that we can't vote our way out of it based on the obvious evidence that we didn't vote our way out of this, then somehow you're a problem. By the way, people on the left and the right agree with what I have to say. I hear about it all the time. Friends of mine who got out of the intelligence services say about 10% of the current CIA in the case officer people, the people that actually worked downrange, doing the job the CIA does in foreign nations, recruiting spies for America, they also think we probably can't vote our way out of this, and that we have all the hallmarks of what is leading towards either a failed state or localized or regional collapse. That's not terroristic. That's called analysis. And you got to be a real dipshit to think otherwise. Here you have Charlie Kirk using the same words. For years, the left shrieked that every Trump comment about the immigration crisis was stochastic terrorism that would lead MAGA mobs to attack and murder immigrants. It never happened, blah, 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 blah. Then he goes on and accuses people of doing stochastic terrorism because there's a video clip of Jimmy Kimmel talking about burning a Tesla. Let's just play that clip real quick.
He fired them immediately upon landing.
Tesla stock is way down, almost disastrously so. People have been vandalizing Tesla vehicles, new Tesla vehicles. Please don't vandalize. Don't ever vandalize Tesla vehicles. And so Elon Musk has been making the rounds in the right-wing media.
Don't ever. He said it objectively. Is he being sarcastic? Is he being satirical? Of course he is. Is he an asshole? Probably. I don't like Jimmy Kimmel's commentary. He's also allowed to say that. He's a freaking comedian. He's doing what he does to an audience that wants it. Who cares? In America, theoretically, we can say really, really uncomfortable things to people, to include hyperbolic statements using hyperbolic rhetoric that achieves an effect, and we're supposed to be protected. Humor, commentary, satire, analysis, hanging in effigy was a big deal for a long time, where people expressed their dislike for things by creating a likeness of someone and then doing violent things to that likeness. Is it unhinged? Potentially. Is it political speech? Of course it is. Saying you can't vote your way out of this is not terroristic. It's analytical. It's actually accurate analytical, because we've already proven that you can't do it over the last 26 years. And watching some piece of shit mouthpiece from the FBI show up after a useless career and a useless existence, being a useless sack of shit, sitting in front of a podcast audience telling people, yes, if you say things that we don't like under this administration, that makes you a potential terrorist. It's seditious, which is to say that you are subverting the American government. Dude, if the American government is so susceptible to my words or Marjorie Taylor Greene's words or Thomas Massey's words or Joe Kent's words sitting at a podcast desk, then we already have proven that you can't vote your way out of this, because people sitting and talking in a little communication manner that is clearly not violent because they're talking to a microphone and they're not even in the same room. If that is seditious and if that is terroristic, you just proved our point. Here's Daniel 292 talking to another mouthpiece. This is a former FBI deputy director and then either a current FBI rapid response governmental employee, but he apparently worked for the Department of War as a special governmental employee doing a bunch of propaganda. Here's two propaganda mouthpieces doing propaganda, protecting the brand, protecting the government, and saying because our guy's in, they're now off limits, even though they're doing the same thing they were doing in Police State when we made a whole movie.
Oh, you're a great guest here. I want to get to this first. You have been really vocal about some of the cancerous rot pretending to be part of our movement. A lot of this stuff going on right now with the Charlie Kirk conspiracies, what Candace is putting out there. And I've addressed this on a bigger picture, how we can never become the cannibalistic left that starts eating its own. They did this. The left did this to itself. They destroyed their movement with men in the women's room, defund the police, just raw stupidity.
We can't become like the cannibalistic left. We can't do the thing where we start cannibalizing our own. Remember what they say about a sentence where the word but is in it? That everything you said before that can be thrown out the window?
But Graham, unfortunately, there are people infiltrating our movement that are...
But unfortunately, we're going to have to actually do what I just said. We're going to have to do cannibalism. Here we go.
Using this old, tried and sadly not true technique, but it does work, of overloading and bombarding people with facts and totally underwhelming people with evidence. That is not, that's the mark of a moron.
That is the mark of a moron. That's why nobody believes you when you said that Epstein killed himself. That's why nobody believes you when you said that you were being honest and transparent. That's why nobody believes you about any of the cases that you touched or that you claim that you touched, even though you were the deputy director and you didn't do a single investigation because you were the deputy director, which is an admin role.
The way smart people work is they drown out irrelevant stimulus, irrelevant facts, and they get to the heart of the matter right away.
Yeah, so the border's not closed. We don't have 10 plus million deportations per year. We have inflation that's out of control. We have gas prices that are over $4 a gallon, and we're entering the strategic reserve. And we started a war with a country that we didn't have previously going. By the way, we haven't closed off the other wars that were started, like the Russia-Ukraine war. So you're right. The evidence is not in your favor. I agree with you. Smart people look at evidence and then they can say, it turns out we're not going to freaking vote our way out of this thing.
I'm getting tired of this shit, man. This is creating a really dangerous situation for a lot of people out there, and it's just rotting our movement.
It's dangerous, which is the same thing as saying it's kind of like stochastic terrorism when you say things that hurt our feelings.
Yeah, no, yes, I've been very vocal.
Yep. This is like your retarded neighbor that doesn't have anything to say, but he's going to stand there at the fence post and he's going to waste your time while you're trying to mow the lawn.
About it, it's led to a lot of pain and a lot of irritation. I would argue that these people, these specific people, and the hard part is for me the same that it is for you. I know these people.
Yeah. And we all think you're a piece of shit. The people that know you think you're a piece of shit because you're a liar. That's why. This is all deeply personal stuff. We didn't change what we were saying. We identified problems. And I don't know Graham Allen, but I know Daniel. And I did know Daniel. And I went on Daniel's radio show like dozens of times. I showed up on his podcast a half dozen times and his TV show at least 5 or 6 times. So yeah, the people that knew you looked at you and said, hey, you sellout piece of shit. Why are you acting like the problem is solved just because, quote unquote, our people are in charge?
I know these people just like you know these people. And it's so when people attack me for saying something about Candace, I always am like, you don't know Candace. I know Candace.
That's called appeal to authority, for whatever it's worth.
My very first book, there's a blurb from Candace Owens talking about how much she loves me on the book, and now she hates my guts. I would argue that a lot of these people that are the cancers that we're seeing right now, you look at them, you look at the people that are either just doing the most evil and demonic, those are the keywords, right, that we're getting paid to say, evil and demonic, and I just want to make sure that I...
Did you cash your check? Did you get it?
Make sure.
The place has taken a reputational hit. There is zero question about it. There were a lot of bad actors. One of them still out there causing us all kinds of trouble. One of them still out there causing us all kinds of trouble. One of them still out there causing us all kinds of trouble. So we had to fix it and rebuild public trust. One of the ways to
do it is to make sure that the same person that used to be in office gets replaced, even if that person dies. Here's your not going to vote your way out of it sort of example of the day. Let's look at the evidence. The evidence is South Carolina voters now get to choose between a Donald Trump-backed Darlene Graham, who's going by Darlene Graham, even though her last name is Nordone, even though theoretically, as a conservative, she took her husband's last name, but she's going by her maiden name because her maiden name is the same name recognition as the name you know. It's Jeff Johnson, the name you know. It's distinguished gentlemen. They've already played this game. We saw this back in the 90s, guys. We saw this tactic. Just run somebody with the same name. Let's put the sister of the guy who just died, the homosexual war boner guy. Let's put that guy's sister in because she's already doesn't know anything about national security. She'll do whatever the military wants. She'll do whatever Trump wants. She's not in there to fill the job. She's just a placeholder. Just kidding. She's not a placeholder. She's a senator who's now an incumbent that's going to be running in a full election. And she's going to be in the GOP Senate primary runoff against Ralph Northam. Ralph Norman's not going to get a shot at it. Why? Because Trump backed this other lady, this lady who knows nothing about national security. But go out and vote harder. Vote as hard as you can, guys. Okay? And then you let me know if you vote your way out of this. That's today. In Oklahoma, we've got 2 other people that are running for office. There's Republican primaries and runoff for governors. We haven't gotten to the final, but in some of these cases, the primary is the vote. Like in my county, the primary is the vote. If you win the primary, then you get to be the congressman. And it doesn't matter if it's an 82-year-old dinosaur who has like freaking leather skin and hasn't been able to have a cognizant thought in a long time. It doesn't matter. John Carter's the name you know. I mean, it's better than Valentina Gomez. Is it? I don't even know. I think you should put clowns in the freaking circus. So do I need to have a dinosaur in the circus? I guess that's interesting, having old things in the circus. This is the oldest living walking person. This is Chuck. This is Charles Grassley, currently known as Chuck, the king of the butter cow. Yesterday, 2 days ago, he posted a picture of a cow made out of butter. It's like, incredible, Chuck. How did they make a butter cow? Whoa. You should see what they can do with ice now, sir. We're not going to vote our way out of this stuff. It'd be ridiculous. The crazy thing is that there's evidence from both sides of the aisle. It continues to be existing. Here's another one. This is CNN talking about stochastic terrorism. It used to be that the left would say the speech is the danger. We used to make fun of them for saying silence is violence, but speech is violence, so violence is violence. All things are violence. Everything is so violent. How about actual violence is actual violence, period. If I put a hatchet into your head because you're in my way, that's violence. If I say, I'd like to hit you in the head with a hatchet, that's me just expressing my opinion that I don't like you standing in my way. One of those is actually a danger to you. And one of them might be a threat, which you'll have to assess while you're standing in front of me. But it actually is probably protected speech. The political right, the political left, there's no difference. They're both wings of the same bat, whatever you want to call it. You can call it a uniparty. All that tells me is it doesn't matter who you vote for. You're not voting your way out of it.
I think there needs to be a reminder of what personal freedom entails. And this is where I get frustrated with my friends on the right, is that you can have whatever view you personally want to
I'm about to tell you what personal freedom entails, and it's going to be limited. You're going to be shocked.
in your home, about the LGBTQ agenda, about gender, about sexuality. And you have a right to raise your children that way. And you have a right to not buy things at Target. You do not have a right to tell other kids they can't read this book about this. They can't talk about their gay parents. They can't buy that shirt at Target. That's not a conservative position. It's a frame.
No, it actually turns out that not showing up and boycotting something, a mass movement against something that is objectively evil, like trying to tell children that mental illness is normal, that turns out to be something that's very conservative. And you don't get to define conservative, crazy lady with a purple blazer on.
Frankly, like a very totalitarian position. We are going way too far. And I think it springs from this. Listen, the sentiment around marriage equality changed rapidly and quickly. And most of the country is there. The young.
Right. That's the problem. Most of the country is there. They think that a man can marry a man.
People, we are there.
70%.
The trans community is something that for a lot of Americans feels new. It feels unfamiliar, and it is leading to fear-mongering and to weaponizing that community. And frankly, they're facing threats. And I think we need to have a real conversation about loving our neighbors, understanding our neighbors, and living in communities safely.
Jay, what about that? Because you both touched on.
Oh, those are Christian values. Are you going to take the rest of the Christianity? Because there's a lot more to it.
He's saying that it stems from fear, and you're saying it's not a rational fear, it's a primal fear. It's still fear. I mean, things are changing quickly.
Right. I mean, like, so 15 years ago, I wrote a book called God versus Gay, The Religious Case for Equality, where
God versus Gay, The Religious Case for Equality, and his credentials are he clerked for Merrick Garland.
I talked about exactly what Alyssa just mentioned. This is actually an opportunity for moral growth. We should welcome this opportunity to look.
Yes. How about no to moral growth? I want moral stagnation because morals are immutable. That's the entire principle of being conservative. So how about go fuck yourself, weirdo gay guy that's going to advocate all kinds of strange things using Christian ideology to try to weaponize and tell Christians what is Christian? How about no? How about not that? Again, when you find out that these people are using the same language that John Nance and Graham Allen and Kash Patel and Daniel Bongino are using, what are we going to do with this thing? Oh, we're going to say, you're just a bunch of leftists. You guys are all the same, which is why we're not voting our way out of this.
Look at our core values, loving our neighbor, caring for respect for all human
Why would we do these things? If only you could answer the question where you got those core values.
beings, making sure that nobody should live in fear.
I actually don't think anybody's allowed to not live in fear. In fact, I think living in fear is really important. So I don't know what the hell he's talking about. Apparently he doesn't understand what fear of God is.
These are sort of core religious values that many secular people hold as well.
Yes, the secular people are the problem. Got it.
Here as well, and they're at issue here. We should be answering this call to conscience, not demonizing a group and feeding the fear. I agree, Joe, look, yes, we talked about this in the context of guns. There's mistrust, there's fear, but there are people who are stoking that mistrust and fear for their own gains, and one of them just announced on Twitter that he's running for president. There's the fear that is already there, and there's the fear that's stoked by opportunists, and the lowest hanging fruit would be to stop that, to stop lying about trans people in their lives, to stop encouraging people to take this kind of action, because this doesn't come out of nowhere. There's this term stochastic terrorism. When you tell people that a group is terrible over and over again, someone somewhere is going to act out, and that's what's happening here.
And so you're responsible for the words that you say making somebody else do something else, because you are so powerful as a podcast host, as an influencer, as a person who just has an opinion and people care what it is. You actually are able to make people do things with your mind. That's telekinesis, Kyle. Do you get how stupid this stuff is? Stochastic terrorism is that I'm able to make you do something violent with my mind by not even explicitly saying the thing that I think you should do. Because you can't vote your way out of this means you actually are trying to get to this state. Failed state, civil conflict, civil war, bombarded buildings. Because as a father, with a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old and a wife that's under 5 feet tall. My goal as a podcast host and a father of these people and a husband is that I hope that we have a vicious civil freaking war where we can bombard the living shit out of the suburbs and destroy the country that I live in. That's obviously what I'm trying to go for because I'm a stochastic terrorist. The amount of fucktarded gymnastics that must be done for you to get to that place where you tell me that the FBI director has us on a list, those of us that say these things that are so obvious to us that you cannot vote your way out of something because your voting actually has already failed. That's the thing that Daniel Bongino said smart people consider evidence. The evidence is we already voted. It didn't work. It didn't work for 26 years. What we've got is more debt, more war, devalued dollar, shitty housing market, garbage job culture, and then being invaded by foreigners. Legally and illegally. And the deportation cheering on that was happening by the Donald Trump administration this morning in the official propaganda from Fox News was that they did a 14-day operation in Washington, D.C. and Maryland that resulted in 1,328 deportation arrests. So they almost got 100 per day. They almost got 100 per day. If they almost got 100 per day in not just Washington, D.C., which apparently was a jaw-dropping number, if they got 100 per day in 100 cities for the entire work year, they would get 3.5 million, which means we would get right up to the edge of what we thought we were going to get. 10, 12 million, 15 million people departed from this country under this administration. In reality, we're going to get about 3 because that was a jaw-dropping number. And the reason that I know we can't vote our way out of it is because a jaw-dropping number is 100 deportations a day in one city. So simple. But luckily, we have Formula One racing. We've got fights on the grounds of the White House. We got a country music sensation. We got the America's Fair for 250th. Meanwhile, they seem like they're celebrating the end of this country. And I don't know how fast it'll happen or whether it'll happen across the entire country or whether it'll happen regionally. But my message has never been go out there and take up arms and start killing off people in government. Guys, if we knew who to kill, they'd already be dead. I will assure you of this. If it was obvious that there are these linchpins that are causing the problems in this country, and we could identify who those people are, if it was 10 people, they'd be dead. If it was 50 people, they would be dead. If it was 350 people, they would be dead. If it was 2,000 people that we could recognize this 2,000 people are the problems, and but for them, America would be back on the right track, they would be dead. I will definitively tell you that because there are plenty of men of action that can recognize the problem. They can say, aha, what I've noticed is this 10, 50, 300, 350, 2,000 people are the stopping block for our world's happiness, for our country's success, and they have to be removed. We got no problem with killing 2,000 people in this country. It turns out you can turn America on a 2,000 person tragedy. We did it on 9/11. You can destroy 2,000 people and you can do it with a blink of an eye overseas. It's not a problem. And we took all those people who were fighting wars for like a quarter of a century and we brought them back home. And they're my friends and they're your friends and they're your neighbors and they're your coworkers. You think those men are not capable of acting on 2,000 people in this country? We just don't know who they are because it's not obvious that it's 2,000 people. It's pretty obvious it's the system itself. The system is broken. It doesn't work. It doesn't serve the people as it was designed to. And it doesn't do the thing that it was designed to do because it has been degraded and debilitated for 113 plus years. And when your system is broken for 113 years, it's actually a freaking miracle that I have peace in the suburbs and I can walk out on my cul-de-sac and get my mail without having to put on a plate carrier. That's actually fairly miraculous, considering we have a functionally broken Senate. We have a judiciary that tells you have to get permission from a judge on whether or not you can represent yourself or whether or not you have to pay tens of thousands of dollars to an attorney who doesn't care about you and is collecting a paycheck whether he wins or loses. That's insane. And you can still walk out and have peace in almost every one of your neighborhoods that you live in if you're hearing my voice. But sure, a 45-year-old father of 4 and husband, prior military guy who spent years as a paramedic, has had people die in my hands, had brought people back to life that had no business living because of a cardiac failure. I'm out there advocating for failed states and civil war. Sure, whatever you want to believe. So hopefully the FBI has a good time listening to this one and then justify your freaking open case for intelligence. You can freaking slob my knob too. Ha! What do you guys think about that? Are we getting hot about it? Yeah. Let me show you one more, just because I feel like it. This is the kind of people you're saddling up to when you say words like stochastic terrorism and you accuse people of your words are violence. They look like beta 24-year-old, pasty white, benches maybe the bar on his best day, unmarried, no children, no capabilities of violence, pussy little white men. This guy is who you're saddling up to, whether you're John Nance, whether you're Daniel Bongino, whether you're the pretty lady named Melissa something or other on CNN, if you're Jake Tapper. This is what you sound like to me. All of you crying about words equals violence. You look like this dude. I would fight this guy with no hands. I would literally fight him with just my face.
I want to say something else about this because honestly, as unhinged and crazy as it seems, it is also incredibly dangerous. I know there are people who think Trump is posting this because he is trying to take away attention from JD Vance's disastrous Sunday morning talk show interviews. That might be true. I also think he is just that unintelligent and impulsive. But regardless of his intention, this is incredibly dangerous behavior. Donald Trump has a track record of whipping people into a frenzy. Regardless of the lies he wants to peddle, he is responsible for the insurrection that took place on January 6th at the US Capitol. He continuously told his supporters that the election was stolen without any proof. He continuously told them that they needed to fight for him to stay in office. He invited them to Washington, D.C., whipped them up into a frenzy, and then did not try to stop them. More recently, he has come up with racist lies about Haitian immigrants coming to the United States and eating cats and dogs. Any rational person knows that this is crazy, but a bunch of irrational people support Donald Trump. Threats have been called into Springfield, Ohio over these lies. Trump tweeting something like this is literally dangerous for the remaining Eras tours in the United States. And I don't say that lightly. Sometimes I think we are too flippant about our language online, but this is truly dangerous. Trump has a track record of causing dangerous situations with things like this. Is this the country we want to live in? A country where a candidate for president is tweeting this about a pop star just because she endorsed his opponent? This is supposed to be an office that has decorum, that has tact. Not only has he thrown all that out the window, but he is actively putting people's lives at risk when he does stuff like this. Let's have a referendum on this once and for all in November. We are not going back.
Shut up, pussy. That's what you sound like if you say words are violence and people who say that you can't vote your way out of this are terrorists. You sound like a pussy. You sound exactly like that little limp-wristed guy. I'm scared of people talking. Welcome to America. In theory, the part of America that is in my mind that I stand on, it says that you have the freedom of speech, the freedom of religion, the freedom of expression, the freedom to associate with who you like, the freedom of the press, to call somebody out for being a pussy. Yeah, write your little articles at town hall, go out there and do little interviews with people, call people terrorists. When you start using the government to come after those folks, you should recognize that's exactly what you are. You're a freaking pussy and a coward. Here's a guy using words. He's super dangerous. This is violence. I don't know why I thought this was funny, but I do.
I'm just reading words that sound dirty, but they're not. You know, that's it. I'm like a wordsmith. I don't care who you are. Cornhole, penetration, Uranus.
Okay, now you've done it. You do not use language.
No, you're wrong. It's what I do.
No, sir.
All right, where was I? Bangkok. Are you on the phone?
I am not on the phone.
You know, you look like Santa Claus. You got a big sack?
You're on the naughty list now.
You know what? Naughty list sounds dirty, too. Okay, good. We're going to add that one. So we got Pussy Willow, Gobble. What are you doing? What do you want to write these down or something?
I'm calling the
Oh, wait, Snatch. Can't forget Snatch.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Would you mind pulling down the language?
Oh, yeah, these words aren't dirty. They just sound like they might be. You know, like manhole, swallow.
Excuse me?
Brajol.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Erect. Climax. Right?
Let's get on the naughty list. Cornholes. Climaxers. Did you guys have fun today? Cool. Sometimes I feel like we were born in the wrong century for those of us that think that physicality is normal and that harsh words are not going to cause any danger. You know what's violent? Violence. And some of it was good. It turns out your entire existence was built on the foundation of someone else violently doing something so that you don't have to do it. And your entire ability to not have to do violence on a daily basis is the threat of violence. That's what our government is meant to do. They're supposed to provide a judicious and disinterested, apathetical threat of violence so that regular people don't have to go do it. We've outsourced our sense of violence to the state. When people take control of that and they use it for their own means, their motives, when they want to go out there and point it towards their enemies because they have personal little vendettas, whether they be the Biden administration, whether they be the Trump administration, whether they be some pussy guy who's a fat guy that used to be in the FBI, all of those people are the enemies of free people. And it makes me wish for a time when we would have just solved it like men. We would have just gone and colonized your dumb asses. We'd have taken from you what you had because you were weak. And you were stupid and you had bad ideas. And unless you made peace with us and paid us tribute, we would have just taken it all. Here's what it used to look like. Here's a guy laying in a tent wondering about colonizing. This is your final thought for the day.
Must have been fun to be a colonizer. Show up to some place no one's ever heard of. A bunch of guns, all your boys. Local tribes are fighting back with sticks and rocks. They don't got a fucking chance. And they know it. They'll try to bargain with you. They're like, look, we'll cooperate, but would you mind fucking up the tribe across the river? And you're a good guy. You're like, yeah, sure. You do that for them. You extract the wealth. Go back home a billionaire. And for the rest of your life, whenever you meet someone at a dinner party, they'll think to themselves, God, this guy is so interesting. Great stories. Well-traveled, cultured. And it probably wouldn't bother you at all that in a couple hundred years, people would call your great-great-grandkids colonizer, imperialist scum. Even though they've done nothing of the sort. They just work in tech. Would have been fun.
Work in tech, just substitute a government desk job. It's the same thing. You've done nothing of the sort. You don't know what it's like to be in the arena. You're weak. And you don't matter at all to people. But your threat is heard. It's acknowledged. So come at me, bro. This show is entitled, You Can't Vote Your Way Out of It, based on the obvious evidence that we're not, and we cannot, and we have not voted our way out of it, despite our best efforts. Hope you guys have a fun Tuesday. I'm going to go do some stuff with my family. If you want to know what the overall message is, what's the alternative? What are you saying? I'm saying go work on your Fs. If you guys don't know what they are, you can rewind the show. Thanks for being part of the program. Look forward to seeing you guys again tomorrow. God bless.
Thanks for listening to The Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram @Kyle Seraphin.